Welcome to another edition of the Movie Club. We have James, the keeper of all data, and the one who keeps you honest anywhere. If you've said that you didn't like this movie 3 years ago, and now you suddenly like it, he'll call you out.
Yep.
There's Josh, creator of Bang, The Ballad of the Tiger, which you can find on Webtoons, and I'll put the link in the description down below. Or buy a physical copy from him. I can put your email address in the description too. I've done that before, so people can email you and get the book. And Steve, or DVC All-Star on YouTube. No One Maniac on Discord. Hi, everyone.
And
Hello.
Say it again.
Steven does have a lot of aliases because everyone else is like James, Torsten, Steven. It's like, depends on the platform and my mood.
Well, I did the votes. I'm about to, once I figure out how and without actually changing my YouTube profile or Google account in general, like rename the channel, but I'll make a separate video on that. But I think the counts have already been in. So moving forward, it's going to be literature and pictures. But yeah, as part of
very fine edition right there.
That's too close. Not a copycat. But yeah, we've had a wide range of genres in this movie club. We had satire, action, adventure, and horror. And today we'll be talking about The Last Unicorn, a children's movie. But is it really a movie just for children? Steve, what do you think?
No, far from it. You're like I am in that you have experienced the story in multiple formats. You've watched a few essays, and there's something deeper beneath the surface.
Josh, I believe you were the most hyped about talking about this movie. You suggested it, and then when the votes were tied, I think you bullied people into voting for it so that it could win. What does the movie mean to you that you're that passionate about it?
It's a couple things. One, I'm excited that we're doing a non-radar film because I think this is our first one. Because everything else has been radar. So it's like, it's nice to know that it's like, hey, let's just do a good film. It's not, it doesn't have to meet certain criteria. But for this one in particular, I think what's kind of weird is like, I was born in the 80s, so like a lot of my memories are early 90s. It's like, I remember at my Nana's house on the ranch watching this movie, like 90% sure she got it from my aunt who had two daughters. So they're like, yeah, here's a VHS, Josh can watch. But it's also like, it reminds me of like old 70s like TV and has a lot of nostalgia memories. So whenever I see it, like pulls on those heartstrings of the ye old times.
James, have you watched the movie when you were a kid? No, for the first time.
Probably, but I don't remember it. So this is like the first time watching in years.
Oh. I remember it vividly. I think I mentioned it on Discord. I don't know when I watched it. I watched it probably 3, 4, 5 times, maybe when I was a kid. Multiple times, definitely. I don't know at what age. My best guess is somewhere between 7 and 10, that 8 range. I remember it because I had nightmares of the Red Bull for years to come. And then rewatching it now, I mean, I was like, okay, that's not necessarily, but I can see, I guess, seeing it through a kid's eye. And back then, I don't think this movie is rated, right? It doesn't have a rating back then. I think movies didn't really, or there was the one category in between that didn't exist. There was no PG-13. It was for.
But they still have one now, right?
Or not?
Well, it was either back in the old day. It was either G, which is like, don't even worry, throw your kids in the theater, they'll be fine. Or PG, which was parental guidance, which is like that can be anything from like nudity, violence, cursing to like just some disturbing imagery. So it was The
They gotta
sky's the
wait.
limit.
They gotta wait and see.
I was about to say, because like Gremlins is PG and Gremlins is a lot more harsh than this movie.
For all ages.
Gremlins was a movie I wasn't allowed to watch as a kid, but my parents had no problem showing me this one.
It's not the
Actually,
best.
again, I must have had it on VHS because, again, watching a movie multiple times doesn't run that often on cable. Usually on cable, a movie came once a year, if at best. So watching it multiple times, there must have been a VHS around somewhere. Have you? So you watched it as a kid, George, Steve? The same for you, or later in life?
It was definitely when I was a kid. It either came on Nickelodeon or TBS on a Saturday morning, and just the style of animation was different from what we were getting in the late 80s, early 90s. So it was really cool to see that. I think it actually was Nickelodeon because for the longest time before they started airing their originals like Doug, Rugrats, they would license things. And I think this was one of those movies that they licensed and would just play from time to time. I still get the same feeling watching it again recently that I did back then. It's a really fascinating movie. And even though it's portrayed as a story for children, even back then, you just get that feeling that there was something more to it.
Yeah, to me, as a kid, the appeal was the fairy tale, the vibe of like the mystical vibe, unicorns and flaming bulls and all of that. Then the terrifying aspect, but never like when I rewatched it, there are so many more things that open, like the underlying meaning or meanings. There's so many different angles what we'll discuss, but none of that was to me like came to me as a kid. Sorry, Josh, you.
No, I was about to say because I feel like I don't know when this kind of happened, but it's like there's been definitely a watering down with kids' media. It's like truthfully, like because I know with like reading grades, like if a kid's in like ninth grade, truthfully or that's all older, I would say like fifth grade, they want them reading like at a sixth or seventh grade level, like they want them a little higher. So I feel like with this movie, it's like yeah, it's made for kids, but it still has those complex issues that yeah, it's like kids haven't really had to deal with yet. But this is the best place to bring them up because it's like this is a at the end of the movie, nothing's going to happen. It's not like the Red Bull's actually going to skewer you into the ocean. You're not going to die. It's just the movie's over, credits run. So this is the time to show some of those more complex ideas.
I mean, yeah, the drama at the end. I mean, we're skipping, or like we'll touch on that later. But the drama at the end isn't something that's like accessible to kids. Oh. There's a cat, and you need an eye patch. Does the cat in the movie have a name? Not well, just
Breeze wandering around in here. Yeah, the cat had an eye patch and a peg leg.
Yep. Let's not hope that for your cat. One thing I did not know when I was a kid is that it's based on a book. So Peter S. Beagle wrote it in 1968, while after a failed attempt or like an abandoned attempt years prior, where he like had 85 pages of a story with a unicorn that he then later picked up and made it into The Last Unicorn. But the initial attempt didn't go anywhere. Didn't know how to continue the story. Had to cut some stuff out and kept only the first few pages or so. Then wrote it in 68. And then the movie came out 14 years later in 1982. Funny thing again, our movie club keeps having connecting points because the thing also came out in 82. After that, well, first, when it came out, I don't think no one knows if it was a success. So that's something I learned. No one has an idea if it was a box office success. Probably yes. But the distribution company went bankrupt. And no one else kept record of how much money it actually made. There are some examples of some movie theaters that kept this movie in like showing this movie for like 5-6 months. But also the benefit of not having a distribution company anymore for the cinema is not paying any fees. So you could basically indefinitely just air this movie and have paying customers and don't pay anything for it. I think it's only for the first few weeks that they have numbers. So I think the budget was a bit under $3 million and it already made way more. I don't know when they stopped counting, but I think around 7-8 million or something, or 12 million, they stopped counting. Then the distribution company went bankrupt and then they kept airing it. But when it came out, I think in the first 2 weeks or in the second week, it was the only movie more successful was a rerun of Star Wars that they had republished. And that is at the same time as E.T. came out and stuff like that. Again, no one kept counting afterwards, so we'll never know. Now, in hindsight, it's become a cult classic, so I'm sure it's considered a success in today's standards.
I do feel like, because we still use like the quote unquote box office, because I wonder if this movie too, like, because a lot of movies made a resurgence when VHS came out. This seems more like something that's like you would base success off of VHS than the original theatrical run.
Yeah, no, I would agree. And also, how many times do you watch that VHS? Right, like there are many like from what I've heard, you never just watch this movie once. Like the kids' movies hardly ever, right? Like if kids like a movie, they'll watch it until they can. Until they know all the lines and can quote it by heart. But no, it's definitely an interesting criteria. Also, the budget is interesting. I think at this time, Disney movies were considered low budget when they were hitting like 20 million. And again, this movie being less than 3 million, super low budget. And based on that budget to pull this off is even more incredible, especially with that cast.
Well, and also, because I think we all know this, but so this was made by Rankin Bass in the U.S., but it was outsourced to Topcraft.
Topcraft.
Yeah, which they later the last film Topcraft ever made was Nazca: The Valley of the Wind, and Hayao Miyazaki took the remaining crew and created Studio Ghibli. But I also think, besides that, this is also the interesting turning point, because in the 80s, anime had a huge boom, especially the Japanese market. So it's like, you almost had films like this where it's like, yeah, they're no longer being made in the US. So Japan's finally kind of going like, what if we try to make our own stuff instead of outsourcing from another country?
In the animation, there's a lot of things in there that, like details, not the story. The story was all. So Peter S. Beagle, he wrote the book and he also wrote the screenplay for this movie. But then it was directed by Rankin Bass, so Arthur Rankin Jr. and Jules Bass. They sent, and again, this is before the internet and before like video calls, so they had to send those instructions over to Japan for them to actually produce the movie, and there was some back and forth there in the animation process, because they didn't know what was this kind of tree or how should this animal look like. There's some like animals in there that don't exist in the real world, right? some creatures that they weren't 100% sure on how they should animate it. They also took some liberties in making some stuff up, which some, I believe, stayed in the movie, some were cut. But like that cat moving the iPad that came from the Japanese animation studio that put that in, that wasn't anywhere written down. And the Red Bull, the design of the Red Bull apparently was way better what the Japanese folks came up with than the initial template of what they had, what they were asked to do.
Well, let's talk about the Red Bull a little bit, because it's like, I swear as a kid that thing was made more of fire. Like in my mind, like it was like 80% fire with like 20% bolt. And rewatching it, I'm like, there's like 20% fire and 80% bolt.
I think so the entire movie is fairly kept in blue, like blue tones. I think there was a video like criticizing it, but it's just the color tone is blue. But I think it even works so much better that you have this red flaming bull, and the rest of the movie is blue to have that red stand out even more. It's just such a stark contrast to the rest of the movie that as a kid, I think you also perceive those things differently with a contrast like that. And your imagination, like again, it's the unicorn, the last one there is, being chased by this humongous bull that's on fire. I think as a kid, your imagination goes through you even more than just watching it. It's like, oh, there's the bull and chasing the unicorn. As an adult, you're like, yeah, the unicorn will be fine. It's like it's not going to die because the movie. But as a kid, I think you have a different perspective and perception.
And there's a couple things that I want to touch on there. One, like I feel like all the creatures in this, like even, and the humans not as much, but the creatures, they all had a certain weight to them. Like the bull, I know that thing had rolls on its legs, like, but it felt like, and it was drooling, like, it felt like a powerful beast where it's like, okay, if this thing starts going, it's going to level like something. Like this can take down a wall easily. Same with the harpy, where it's like, I'm always shocked where I'm like, because it's like, I feel like that thing could easily splinter the branch it's on, but it also knows like, this is the only perch I have. So I always felt like that. But so you talked about the color. I actually wish more movies would do that with color, because a prime example of a modern day movie that does that is Black Panther. Because all the heroes in Black Panther's color schemes are black, red, and green, which are based off the African flag, whereas all the villains are based off of blue, because that is not a natural dye found in Africa and associated with Europeans. So it's nice because especially like in this, King Haggard and I forget the prince's name.
Lear.
Lear. L-I-R. I never know how to pronounce it.
Yeah, the dude, aka Jeff Bridges. But they were both wearing red.
So you talked about Rankin Bass. I think so. Peter S. Beagle, he was super concerned about them taking on this project because he hated everything they've done prior to it. It was when he first watched the movie. Like I didn't even know what to say. Like I couldn't admit that it was good. I had to watch multiple times for me to actually say, "Wow, this is cool." But yeah, they did lots of like stop motion animation prior to that, and the only movies that were in that style were The Hobbit and Return of the King. Some attempts of them animated versions of Tolkien's saga. So I think I watched Return of the King. I don't know. There was one animated version I watched as a kid. I don't know if it was this one or if there was ever another that was made. But I remember it ended halfway through with the trees just walking. It's like the middle of the movie. So it might not have been The Return of the King. It might have been some other animated movie.
That had to be Return of the King because the Ents aren't introduced until the Two Towers.
Okay.
Because Two Towers... Because originally, Ralph Bakshi made the Lord of the Rings, which is just the Fellowship of the Rings, if memory serves right. No one made a Two Tower movie until the Peter Jackson.
Gotcha. But those movies were in a similar animation style, so you can see the faces. Like there's a certain way you can identify like Disney movies of that time. They are all in the same kind of art style, and the same way here, like people have more wrinkles, they're more grimacing, less cartoony.
Gnarly. You're looking for the word gnarly.
There you go. Gnarly. And I know a few years after The Last Unicorn, they were behind Thundercats. I feel Thundercats doesn't really fall into that category. Maybe they had someone else animating it. I don't know. But it felt like that. I didn't expect them to have made Thundercats. When I did the research, like, oh, that also came from them. Interesting.
It's two things. If you look at the original concept art of Thundercats 1000% looks like all the other stuff. But because they didn't work with Topcraft, they worked with Madhouse, who is one of the best. Like they're still around. They're one of the best Japanese studios. But also since it's TV, the budget's lower. So like little things where it's like it doesn't seem like a big deal, but like yeah, all those lines animating it adds up to money. So it's like okay, let's smooth this out, make it a little bit more simplistic for the. That's also why with Thundercats, because this was a trick that later stuff like Sailor Moon and all this stuff, the whole transformation is like every time I know how to call out the Thundercats because it's like, man, that's saving us a minute worth of animation. And them going, thunder, thunder. Like, yeah, there's 2 enemies left. Why are we calling the rest of these guys?
Makes sense. And then Topcraft also went bankrupt a few years later, I guess. And eventually, I don't know if it legally turned into Studio Ghibli or if just the employees left and kind of created Studio Ghibli.
Topcraft went to bunk. Miyazaki grabbed up all the people he wanted to from there and created Studio Ghibli. So legally, they're not related. Spiritually, they are.
Right, where do you guys want to go next? The plot? I want to talk about the cast or the soundtrack? There's so many things in this movie we got to talk about. It's like a never-ending list.
I don't care. It doesn't bother me.
I'm open to anything because Josh is the one who put this movie on the list, and I think he is the most passionate prior to this.
Let's talk about America, aka the music.
All right, perfect. I had to look that up earlier because I had this I remembered something from a few years ago, and I wasn't 100% sure, and Googled it. So it is what I remembered. So America is the only band, I believe, that Michael Jackson ever did a cover to. So the song of America, Horse with No Name, Michael Jackson did a song, a Place with No Name that he never published, never released until it was found after his death, and then they commercialized it and brought it out because money. But I found that interesting that known until now, right? Like maybe there were other songs that are like somewhere in the deep archives, but that's the only cover song he ever made. Is the song by America. That's all the prior knowledge I had about America. The soundtrack is amazing. I think the song fits so well into the movie. I mean, it helped that they did the animation after the songs were recorded and that they actually matched the animation to the songs, but even by themselves, I think it's just a great soundtrack.
Now, because like in the 70s and 80s, there was a ton of fantasy and a weird trope. Like, I don't know how it started, but I love it. Because there's always like the initial like call to action, then it's like, oh, I need to leave and go on to this quest or my adventure. Cue the like mellow, sad music, like not depressing, but it's the kind of thing where it's like I feel like this is something my grandma would listen to on the porch while watching like the sunset or the like storm coming in music.
I think it was big in Germany too.
Was it, Torsten? Since you speak for all that country and its history?
Which one?
The song.
The song? Sorry, say it again.
I think it was the Rankin Unicorn song by America.
In the German version?
No, it was on top. It was in the top 100.
In the top. I don't know. Oh no, if it was in the music charts. I don't even know if they. So again, as a kid, I watched it in German, and I think Germany was one of the only countries where it was really big after its release in the 80s. Benefited from Christopher Lee doing also the voice for King Haggard in German, so him being fluent in German. And it had a pretty big marketing budget, I believe. They had like huge advertisement for the movie. And usually movies in Germany when they're released, or not usually, all movies that are released are translated and dubbed. So you basically have synchronized not voiceover, but their attempt to make the lip movement match the speech so that it's not obvious to you that the movie isn't actually in German, which is way easier for animation than it is for real life action, which is done regardless. But especially when, like in the first place, the mouth movement doesn't really match the words that much in this movie. Sometimes it's kind of just speaking and no one moves their mouth. But that's done to all German movies. So one thing, sorry, that I want to come back to the soundtrack is that usually for kids movies, it is also done for the music. So they write, like DuckTales has their own theme, like all the 80s cartoons have their own German theme song. I can't remember if this movie had the original music by America or if they rewrote the music into German.
Also, I was going to say, Dorson, tell me you don't watch anime without saying you don't watch anime. Dubbing. The word you're looking for is dubbing.
Dubbing.
No, like, I think the other thing is, what's kind of weird is when the whole Echoes of Time, America was big back then. So it's like, it was a big deal to have this band be in this movie because it's like, they were never like the Beatles or the Stones, but it's like they were a well-known band. So I think like that probably, I didn't watch any of the old like trailers or marketing, but I wouldn't be surprised if they're like original music by America. Well, like I said, especially the very beginning when she goes from her woods, but it's just like, I love that trope of that like melancholy, like, I don't even know, bluegrass kind of music where it's like, this is the traveling song.
Man's Road? Or you mean the opening song? Because the opening song is kind of, again, what we had with this thing. And it's a thing of that time. You have to have the credit, like give the voice actors the credit in the beginning. You don't have like 10-minute credits after no one's watching in the end anymore. So you put those in the beginning, especially in the 80s. And that's the last unicorn, the main theme song in the beginning. But then when she actually goes off and goes traveling, you have like Man's Road. And that's multiple times throughout the movie. The song comes back every time basically she travels. When she travels by herself or with Mendrick and Molly together, they're still playing the same song.
Also, it's a little thing, but man, I appreciate, especially watching a lot of, like after watching the thing, them just having the montage of like, hey, it's fall, now it's snow, now we're in spring. The climate's a little, the background's a little different because it's like, yeah, it feels like she's been wandering around for a very long time. Whereas like most movies, I'm like, has it been a week, a day, 2 hours? Oh yeah.
I wish they had done that more when they were in the castle, because the passage of time there isn't really, I mean, you also have the montage towards background music, but you don't have seasons changing. You just have the description of different characters doing different things. But in the movie, there's months that are passing. That's how she, again, loses her memory and stuff. But yeah, I agree. And it reminded me, especially the opening traveling scene, or like the traveling in the beginning of like Lion King, when Simba takes off and just goes through kind of similar shot over the different landscapes, running away. I guess here she's running towards some unknown.
Because this definitely feels very fairy tale-esque, especially with the butterfly. I always forget that butterfly. Because it's like, oh yeah, this is technically like the call to action. But the butterfly doesn't give her enough information. It's not like, hey, go due south. Well, like, Lord of the Rings, it's like everyone knows where Mount Doom is. There's no question. So for her, it's like, I have no idea. I just know it's not in my woods, so let me go wander.
I think they do a great job of of giving her a reason to leave, right? Like because the butterfly isn't even the first. You have first the hunters that come into the forest and it's like that implement the ideas. Like why she overhears them talking about why there's only one last one and it's got to be this forest because there are no seasons here. So for her, it's like okay, that implements the idea of her being the last, and then the butterfly gives her a reason and direction, kind of like more information. Like well, there's a Red Bull and they're all driven over the roads and I don't know if he tells her into the water. I don't think the water has been established yet. It's just the Red Bull took them all and covered their footprint. And then for her, it's more like, even then she doesn't leave, right? She's still in the forest. Like she has the information from the hunters, from the butterfly. And then at night, she suddenly wakes up, sees the moon. It's like, holy crap, I got to do something. But the idea has been implemented way before and it's like brooding in her mind the whole time. I think that's were very well like executed of how that decision comes to be. It's not just like, okay, I got a quest, I got to go, but over time being installed.
Well, what's also kind of interesting, talking about the unicorn herself, they're kind of vamped creatures that don't like. It's weird because they're eternal, like can't die, but they don't really live because it's like they don't do anything when you really think about it. They just exist. So it's kind of like even the idea of her being like, I should go find out where my own kind is a foreign thought because it's like that we've never been in like danger before. Like you get the idea like maybe some have died in the past, but it's never been like the idea of all of them going, it's like, no, that's not possible. Unicorns will always exist.
And nothing really changes for her, right? Like if other than the fact knowing that she's the last, because she's unaffected by it. She like whether she knows or not, or whether it happened or not, doesn't make a difference. Her piece of the forest is going to stay the same. She can stay there. I don't think the Red Bull would venture that far. It's another thing. Like I guess one of the unanswered questions is, how did the Red Bull miss her in the first place? Is that just the most remote forest there ever was? And none of the other unicorns were that far inland? Or why was she missed? But she was, and then for her, nothing changes other than like the fact of knowing. Like that's the information that she gets where she then feels like she needs to take action at some point.
Well, I think the other question is too, because like I know, like, because we all watch the videos talking about how this is, a symbolism for death and mortality. But in some ways, it's like this definitely feels like I think the whole maturity and coming into oneself. Because it's like you can kind of look at the unicorn when she's in the forest like a child, like a baby or a toddler, where it's like she doesn't know. Because even like she sticks to the road the whole time. The one farmer tried to capture her as a mare. It's like, yeah, she was smart enough, but it's like Mama Mutua would, or whatever, the witch would not have found her if she went like 30 feet away from the road. But she lacks any, not agency, but it's like she literally has no life experiences at all.
He has no street smarts at all.
That chart did not get filled.
Because we are not given a specific time period in which the story is set. We can make assumptions that it takes place in the medieval era because there are mythical creatures, there's castles, but then you've got the butterfly, who is an allegory for the creator, and he's making, at least back then, modern day pop culture references. And I think that's pretty hilarious because even though he's a little crazy and just kind of says off the cuff whatever he wants, without that butterfly in the movie and a finished book that came to be, you don't really have motivation for the unicorn to venture on this journey to figure out what happened to the rest of her kind. And like Josh said, there are a lot of lessons to be taught here, and even though the unicorn is our primary protagonist, there's a lot to be learned for this character about humility and having appreciation for the life that you have, because she's very vain and very prideful to the point where even though she recognizes that this man she encounters on the road who wants to capture her, he calls her a horse, he calls her a mare. And to her, that's an insult because she's above all of that. She's not a mortal creature, even though she recognizes that men cannot recognize unicorns for what they are unless they have one foot in the world of magic.
It's also with the whole, it makes sense like from a fairy tale aspect, but it's also this weird logic where it's like, okay, wait, you're inside your forest hanging out with the animal folks, hiding from men, but then you're upset that men don't know you on first sight. It's like, what? But man, my favorite part of this movie, though, the circus.
Interesting. That's one of my least favorite, but again, based on, I guess, to me, it's not as bad as the scene in Dumbo, where the mom is being captured and kept in a cage. But similar to that, maybe it's just the trope or not the trope, the theme. And I know, Josh, you probably switched the camera off out of protest. But no, not meaning that it isn't a good scene. It's just I don't know when Dumbo came out way earlier. I don't know where in my childhood I watched each movie, but it's like a similar scene being of like, I don't like this idea.
Dumbo was 1941.
Yeah. But not liking this idea at all.
Well, okay. Whoa. Let me defend this. I'm not like, yay, the main character's now in a cage.
No, I get that. It's just like, again, that's my personal baggage of watching a movie.
I was a little bit, because as I pointed out, she was a little vain and prideful at that point and sticking her nose up at everyone she encountered. And it's like, excuse me, you're the one who shuttered yourself away from the world. You don't understand what's going on, and you've put yourself in this situation. So maybe this will teach you a little humility. But as we see during this scene at the carnival, she's still full of pride and almost a certain kind of malice toward the way that she's viewed by the world. And that's how she views the world as well.
Well, and that makes sense, because I mean, like, let's look at it from her point of view. It's like, let me go to bed. It's now night. What the hell's on my head, and what are these bars? You know, it's like, you're not going to instantly change. Especially because she was only in there for a day.
Was it a day or 2 days?
It was, I feel like it was a couple days. It feels like maybe 2, because I'll say this, it feels like she was captured, like they did the rounds a couple times, then she got out. Like it definitely wasn't like a months or weeks kind of thing.
Yeah, the timeline's not clear, but it's obvious that she's not in there as long as the harpy or any of those withered and elderly animals that Madame Fortuna is using for her own edification. Yeah. And
I kind of wish the harpy would have came back.
That
a bigger role later.
Piss out of me as a kid. That thing was terrifying. The 3-boob scary bird.
You see, I didn't have any problems as a kid with the harpy. I was like, harpy's fine.
Was this before or after the Fifth Element?
Way before.
Oh, way before.
Total Recall.
You think it's Total Recall, yeah.
Oh, I think it's one of them.
Well, I was going to say the other thing I love about the scene is all the different character designs for like the illusions of the monsters, because it's like I said, there's some great ones. And I said this in the chat, but I'm like, I really wish we could have got like a Witcher, like, you know, a little bit more action, but like in this style, especially seeing some of those creatures, I'm like, yes.
There's also stuff that went over kids, at least me as a kid. I had no idea what a manticore was or any of the other ones. And they omitted a few, right? They didn't put spider in there. They didn't put, I think, the three-headed dog or something. That wasn't in the movie. That originally was in the book. And then Mummy Fortuna also didn't play her role as Ellie, as like old age being the last big threat, because I think it's also more imaginary than you can put on a page.
Well, and it's also, I do.
Are you implying anything there, Steve? Like that the dog that's missing that was omitted?
Yeah, Monty and Bree, they both want attention when they want attention.
And I heard like the dog creature in the movie wasn't in the movie.
That could be.
Now, I love the opening. I love the opening shot, especially with the recreation of the classic medieval painting. I do feel like the opening section could have been edited down a little bit because we might have been able to get like more from the circus, especially more for like the very end with the castle, which we'll get there. But yeah, it's interesting because it's also like as an adult too, because when they're like blah blah blah, the world serpent, I can never pronounce his name. And it's like the world serpent is in that cage. The thing that surrounds the world is in that cage. But you couldn't go basilisk; you had to go world serpent.
And it had to cut a few things out from the book, otherwise it wouldn't have made it in 1.5 hours. Again, like we can talk about this later, but this movie should have been 2 hours. There's so many scenes they should have put in there later with Hexgate and stuff. But this movie would have deserved 2 hours. I think for them originally it was even too long because when it was released in cinemas, I think there were like 8-9 minutes that were cut from this, like a minute here and there that completely like derailed some of the scenes. But the scene with Mummy Fortuna stuff was cut there. In the book, I think it was 2 nights because Schmendrick comes back to her cage and talks to her multiple occasions. Because he tries to get her out first, and then he comes back later, a day or night later, and then when he actually rescues her, I think there are multiple scenes of that, and you have Rook also guiding multiple tours through the circus or like the carnival.
Also, I feel like the conversation with Mama Fortuna in the unicorn, it's like that's one of the highlights of this movie, especially when it talks about it's like, yes, I know I'm a fraud, I know I'm a fake, but I have you in the heart. Like I might be this, but I also did that, and it's like that. Especially the older I get, I'm like, oof, this rings.
That's a legacy. I mean, that's in the video that you shared, right? Like I'll link to that in the description too. But like I think we all watched it, the Death and Legacy. Death of a Legacy or something like that. About an hour about the last unicorn and the meaning of death and legacy. When I first watched it was before I rewatched the movie as an adult. I was like, wow, this is like there's more stuff in there. I should rewatch this movie, and then I was glad that we did it for the movie club, so I could rewatch the movie. And after that, I was like, yes, that's accurate. But it's only about 30% of what the meaning, or what the meaning of this movie is. It's definitely not all encompassing. It's one aspect is death and your legacy, but definitely with Mummy Fortuna, you have the legacy. She wants to build a legacy, and her only claim to fame is having captured the harpy and the unicorn. No other witch would have dared to and kept them in captivity for that long. And she is very clear that she knows that will be her downfall and that the harpy will eventually kill her. Kind of foreshadowing to King Haggard, who is kind of the same. Like, I think he's, in the end, he also knows, he doesn't know like it will be his downfall, but he definitely wants to be brought down. We can talk about that when we get there. But for Mummy Fortuna, I think she's just waiting for her end when her powers run out, and like someone, like not I think the harpy will kill.
I think the other thing though too is like how to word this. The hard thing, the great thing about youth is there's endless possibilities. Like it literally feels like the road is open to you, and it's like, hey, there's limitless possibilities. The older you get, the less possibilities there are. So it's like, what's great about Mama Fortuna, at some point you get the feeling like she realized, like, I will never be like the head witch. I'll never do this. I'll never do this. It's a long list I'll never do. But then she saw this opportunity. It's like, you know what? The world can forget about me. Everything else can turn to dust. But this creature will never forget me. And I will, like, that's what I want. So that's the question, too, where it's like, it brings up the whole, like, what is your desire, like, worth the price? To quote the girl next door, is this squeeze worth the juice?
And you have in the scene, you have a lot of pride. Her being proud of that, but also you have Schmendrick, who's basically introduced through the carnival, knowing that it is a unicorn and not a mare. But when he actually rescues or frees the unicorn, he tries to do so via various magic tricks, even though he has the keys in his pocket. So he really, really wants his magic to work, and it doesn't. I think that's a very funny angle. Well, you could say tragic, but since he has the keys anyway, he's gonna be able to free the unicorn. It's more funny to attempt it with magic first.
I do feel like that introduces this character where he's like, he's smart and practical enough to know like what he needs, but he's still as much of a dreamer, hoping like magic can do it. And it's like, the other question is like, did the magic not work because he had the key, aka he knew like this was probably going to fail, let me get the key.
That's a good point. I didn't think about that. But when you think about the moment when his magic actually worked, is when he was the most desperate, when it needed to work the most, and he didn't actually intend the outcomes. He just said, like, magic, do as you will, and put all his like desperation into it, and that's when it worked.
His magic works when he's willing to be humble, when he's willing to utilize it for what it actually needs to be used for. Otherwise, he's no better than the woman who probably for years kept him in captivity and humiliated him. And it allows him to overcome his namesake. He stops being foolish and incompetent when he's willing to be just a little bit humble and access the magic.
I guess I'll say this. I feel like Mama Fatu, I don't know, I have said her name like 10,000 different ways. Mama Fatu, with all the animals in the cages, she kept them. I always felt like with those two, she could take or leave if they could go, but she also knows they have nowhere to go.
Well, she also knows once she's gone, there's no more magic keeping them in, so they would free themselves. And what else would she do? Again, she wants to keep them as her claim to fame.
No, I'm saying the two helpers, the two gentlemen, the two humans.
Oh, okay.
I don't think he's like magically keeping them. I think it's more she's just like, you two have nowhere to go. Like, she doesn't give them much thought.
Yeah, but especially Schmendrick, he says like he wants to do something else. Like, this is not my last job. Like, I'm going to find something else in the future. Like, I don't know what his reasoning is for staying with her.
It's kind of similar to One Piece with Kobe.
Nice.
It is.
It is. You're not wrong. And I got that reference, but I don't know if these two got that reference.
No, that's why
I've only watched the first. I only watched the first 3 episodes of the show. I have not read the manga.
You should have got that reference. With
I'm all caught up, Josh. So no worries.
Kobe at the beginning, he's the kid with the pink hair because he's with the pirates, even though he wants to join the Navy. Long story short.
Yeah, no, I get it. Yeah. Sorry, I'm really bad with names, so you had to say pink hair, and then I know what you mean.
Also, watch The Last Unicorn, then watch One Piece, all 1,000 episodes. You'll thank me later.
I'll watch the Netflix one. It's pretty good. I know, blasphemous for you guys, but
they both are good, but
one thing with regards to Mami Fortuna, so the crow or raven or whatever is in her headpiece, I think that's something that also the Japanese studio put in that was not requested of them. But even more interesting, I didn't notice. I had like the commentary, Peter S. Beagle and like 3 co-producers of the movie were talking about it on the audio commentary track for the movie. I think I watched the movie like 3 times, including that version over the last week. But they pointed out, and I was like, I had to look at it again, that the Raven actually, after Mummy Fortuna got killed and Rook got killed by the Harpy, the Raven or Crow or whatever stayed with Schmendrick throughout the rest of the movie. So it's kind of hovering around him until the end. Like, I didn't even catch that.
I was curious because there's the montage with the prince going out to kill the dragon, which we're skipping a little bit ahead, but the Raven shows up there. I think it's a Raven. And you know what? I think it's actually a crow now that I think about it, because crows are, wait a minute, which one's bigger? No, ravens are bigger. Oh, I should know this because
the blackbird, it's around and it sticks around. And also, like, this is like what you get when you have people being in love with this project. It's not only the voice actors that almost all read the book and were in this. Like, I think Christopher Lee came to the set with his own book and markers of like, this is the stuff you're not allowed to cut out. But apparently on the side of the animation studio as well, like if you have people being in love with the project, they pay attention to those little details. There's one later with the cat that I love that I also didn't know, and I only found out like 2 hours ago. That we can talk about then. But
the birds are Raven because ravens are bigger. Birds are
Raven. All right.
It's also Raven because Japanese have some of the biggest effing ravens, and they actually warn people in parks because they will attack children because they have no fear. And that actually makes sense because ravens are one of the few birds that actually remember humans. To warn people, like, don't do anything bad to a raven because they will tell their friends and attack you on a regular basis.
So maybe that's the raven's way of thanking Schmendrick, like because he saw that Mummy Fortuna was not up to no good, and then now he's hung with him, or he was plotting his revenge throughout the rest of the movie. And if there's ever a sequel, well, there was a sequel, but like a little bit too far in the future, the Raven will attempt his revenge on Schmendrick for killing Mummy Fortuna or helping. Anyway,
but man, okay, when that harpy coming out of that cage, though, that always, especially when it's like, I won't attack you. It's like, you know, she's going to attack. It's like, ooh, yeah.
And I love, like, in the book, there's a line that the harpy says that they didn't put in the movie, and I wish they did because it's so powerful. The harpy tells the unicorn, before the unicorn freed the harpy, like, if you free me, I will kill you. Free me. It's like, woo. When the unicorn still did it, they didn't put that in the movie. In the movie, she just says, like, we're sisters. Like, you should free me. We're sisters. It's like, that's not the original. Like, you should. They kept like 80% of the dialogue original, what it was in the book. Why didn't they keep that one? But I guess it's still, they tried to make a children's movie, even though the book isn't for kids. Guess they couldn't put that in. It's like, we'll kill you. Free me.
Yeah, especially because when she mentions like the other witches, I think the other thing that's kind of interesting about this always feels like the tail end of magic, where it's like for the rest of the world, yeah, they know like dragons exist, like harpies exist, but it feels like they're starting to fade out. Like this is at the tail, like all of a sudden it's like this is the end of an age.
There's so many good stories in this that could work as a prequel. Like, where do those characters come from? How were they when they were young, before they got captured, before they become what they are, right? Except for the unicorn. I mean, we know she just hung out for the last 500 years in her forest. But everyone else has such a backstory. Molly and Schmendrick himself, Mummy Fortuna.
Can we talk about one of the most painful lines in all of
yes, go ahead.
So leave the carnival. They then get captured by like the worst bandits ever. Because it's weird. It's like, I haven't read the book yet, so it's like in the movie you're always like, I'm not quite sure if they're thieves, if they're rebels, if they're scoundrels with a good heart, if they're literally like a ravine of bodies behind them. Like they feel incompetent at the very least. Like they don't feel like the best.
They want to be Robin Hood almost.
In the book, they are first it's a little bit different in the book. In the book, first they get to a town where Schmendrick tries to impress the mayor, then the bandits come and then they capture him because he does some stupid stuff. They steal his head and he wants it back, but he's too insisting on getting his head back. Once you shouldn't pick your battle. And the unicorn actually is not being captured because it's with the horses in the stable, or the whatever that's called, where the horses hang out. And then they get to the forest, and there's a scene. So I think the bandits are meant to be stupid because in the scene they argue about a password, like Jack Diggly or whatever, Jingly or Diggly. When he gets to Kali, he has to say a password, and then they make him recite the password. And then they said, well, we changed it. It was the right one, but we changed it. So you have to know the new one. Anyways, in the end, it's a back and forth about some stupid stuff. Like, make the sound of a giraffe. Like, giraffes don't make sounds. That's why you have to make it 3 times. So I think they're meant to be a little bit dumb. But yeah, in the movie, they get to the bandits just by walking through the forest, getting captured there. And then from there, I think it stays there's a lot of stuff that got cut out, but the gist of it still remains. Like, Kali is the leader. Mandrake is basically by sweet talking him or praising his efforts, or I know about you, you're this great bandit, getting on his favorite side in his favor, and then Kali is basically abandoning the idea of capture, tying him up or something, invites him until he does the whole Robin Hood stunt, where all the men run off. But yeah, it's what's the dumbest line, Josh?
So, well, a couple things before we get there. That Robin Hood sequence always felt kind of weird to me as a kid because, one, I'm like, oh, I guess Robin Hood's real in this because it's how old is Robin Hood? 2,
is it though?
But 2, the other thing is, I don't know. It's because there was a certain pace, and then you get to the Robin Hood bit. It's okay. But then the line that haunts me, especially the older I get, is when Molly sees the unicorn. And it's you're expecting her to be overjoyed, oh my gosh, it's a real unicorn. And it is pissed off rage. Especially it's where were you 20 years ago, 10 years ago when I was new, and yet especially because you get the idea she feels like Mama Martu, where it's Mama Fatu, where it's her life has passed her by, but Molly hasn't decided how she's going to end her not end her life, but what to how she'll continue that downward, because Mama Martu is I made my choice. This bed has been made. I've been sleeping in here. With Molly, it's she doesn't quite know. It's do I end up staying with the bandits? Do I do something else? But it's there's limited possibilities.
I get what you're saying, and I had the same feeling when I was a kid rewatching this. I was this is actually, so this comes from a perspective of the older person who has missed opportunities in her life. When she was a young maiden, unicorns are apparently meant. In the book, there are more examples. You're a young maiden, the unicorn comes to you, especially if you're a young princess. We don't know the backstory of Molly, the full backstory, where she comes from, how she was raised. But she is basically, she's mourning the missed opportunity, the different paths she could have gone if the unicorn came to her 20 years prior. Then she wouldn't have probably gone with the bandits, but had a different life in whatever castle she grew up in. And that's why she's probably realizing also unicorns are real at this point. Where were you when I needed you? You could have come. Now it's does it even matter at this point, because I'm still here with the bandits? I mean, she doesn't take long to change her mind, but no, I get what you said, but yeah, I don't know. I found it very strong, from her to, it's her introduction to the story, and it establishes so many things, her point in life of having missed those opportunities prior, and then suddenly all of that those possibilities come into her mind, and she sees them or is reminded of them not being a possibility anymore, based on where she is now.
Well,
like if you want something all your life and then you get it when you can't use it anymore.
I was going to say, because when you're a kid watching this, that doesn't make sense, because you're like, wait a minute, why would she be upset? But especially,
out of nowhere.
Yeah. Too, like, the older you get, I'm like, no, completely. Because it's like, it's a dangerous thought, but what if? But yeah, because it's like, oh man, what if I had this job 10 years earlier, or like 20 years, like how different? Or like, what if I knew what I knew now? Especially with Molly, I think it's getting a little better society. Well, let's be honest, like a lot of women's, worth was equal to like how young they were, childbirthing, and how attractive they were. And most of those go away with old age. So it's like, especially if you're not married or in an established house, it's like, oh, you're like, what is your worth?
Well, Robin Hood. I like in the book, it's way fleshed out way better with Robin Hood. So they put it in a movie because they had to. Like actually they didn't have to, but they did decide to put Robin Hood in there as like the way for basically get rid of the remaining bandits. In the book, it's actually breaking the fourth wall. It's like the meta level of them realizing we're in a fairy tale, because there's a big debate between Cully and Molly and I don't know if someone else joins in, but between, is Robin Hood real or not? Or are we real? Or are we the fairy tale? It's like, no, Robin Hood is real and Cully is the made up version. And that happens throughout the book on multiple points. In the commentary, they claim, or they mention, I don't know how much truth there is. There's a whole sad story about how the manager treated Peter as Beagle. When the commentary track was recorded, it was at the beginning of that episode. They had a lawsuit later, and Beagle won, like until I think last year or 2 years ago. He won, but it was recorded in 2015. So I was like, I don't know how much I should trust this. And this is sad watching, because you know how he treated him. Like basically locked this old man into like a room and made him sign like 5,000 autographs and sent him on this 3-year-long tour. Displaying the movie across the state, and having all those appearances, more than 500 appearances, and with his deteriorating health, still pushed him to do so when he had to cancel shows because he got too sick. He basically forced him to sign apology letters and all of this crap. But in the commentary, so that manager claims that this is the first appearance. He claims there's a lot of other stuff too that we can discuss, but take it with a grain of salt. And I haven't done the research of verifying the information, but this is the first book where that meta level is reached, so where the fourth wall is broken, where it becomes a little bit satire that the characters know that they are in a fairy tale, and they talk openly about it. It's like, oh, we're the fairy tale. Robin Hood is real. And that's one of those scenes, which in the book is a great angle. It's a great subplot. And one of those points being discussed there. In the movie, it doesn't come across as that.
I was going to say, I do feel like they don't have that conversation, but it definitely feels like the bandits and they do feel like the real version of Robin Hood, where it's like, yeah, he's not as sexy, like they're not as charming. It's like they're kind of dirty. It's like, yeah, but you can see the parallels where it's like they both live in the woods, like they, fawn over their imagery. Of course, I'm not gonna lie. You had me, then you lost me, especially I'm like manager, and you really lost me. And then I'm like, oh, you could probably see my face and where I'm like,
I'm sorry, my mind sometimes goes off because of all the information in there.
I was gonna say, here's the good and bad thing about this movie club. You become an expert on this movie for like 48 hours.
But that information doesn't lose you. We could still do the Dogma movie club or Fear and Loathing and other movie clubs. So probably can can still recall 80% of that those discussions. I don't know. It sticks with you. It's good to have done that research that I would have not done otherwise.
I'm just looking for when we get to the movie where you're like, I don't have to do as much research because I've already done it.
I don't know, because even with Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, I still did a bunch of research that I had never done previously, and I watched that movie, 20, 30 times at that point already, without the movie club. But it's neither here or there. But
here's another thing that everyone skips over, but scared the fuck out of me as a kid: the tree.
Oh no, yeah, no, 100% agreed. I didn't know where to put it as a kid. It was just gross and like suffocating.
You know what I think it is? And I was thinking about this before this club, and I think I can nail why like it's kind of frightening for kids. Because you look at it and you're like, well, it's true, like big boobs, but it's like as an adult, like I've seen way worse as an adult. But as a kid, like, especially I grew up in a religious household, so like sexuality was definitely like a no, like this open sexuality was a no. Two, the tree is modeled after like an older woman, and this isn't characteristics, especially in a fairy tale of you seeing an older woman. It's like, well, no, they're either like wicked or they're like fairy godmother, wicked witch, not this like sexual being. Excuse me. So as a kid, it's this weird ground of like, should I be watching this? Like, you'll see what's going on here. Because I do feel like a lot of parents probably went like, watch the beginning like, this is some effing unicorn in a forest. This is fine. By the time you get to like the harpy in the tree, as a kid, you're like, am I supposed to be in here?
I don't know the harpy, but yeah, the tree was weird. And I remember it. There were a few scenes I could still remember from when I watched it as a kid. And one of those was this. The tree, and I remembered it way longer as a kid, probably because it was uncomfortable. Not only like that aspect, like, well, even as a kid, you don't understand maybe that concept pre-puberty of like sexuality, and especially like that part, but maybe also the suffocation aspect. Like, I mean, he was in there, he couldn't really, he was stuck. So I don't know.
Oh yeah, there was clear not consent from Smedrick, but she did not. Well, it's also, and I always thought about this because I'm like, was that the tree's personality or was that like Smedrick's personality coming out on the tree? Like, was this like a deep, dark, like something he wanted, or it's like this is the tree's like person? It's like
you can tell a guy did that one. A guy did that artwork because of shadows.
I don't know. I'm going to throw her under the bus, even though she'll never watch this. Bar is just a horny pearl, like just the worst.
No, but neither the tree nor the harpies triple boobs were in the book. So I mean, the tree was in the book, but it wasn't that scene.
It wasn't that voluptuously described in the book.
And I think they also didn't describe it to the Japanese studio, so it was just some Japanese animator who made that decision.
Yeah, I posted a picture of shadows.
So yeah, for both, there was just a horny Japanese animator.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was about to say, well, and it's also, Japan's got a very different culture, like pop culture, but also just history. Because the other, long story short, because the thing like I forget about this with Japan, but they went from like a feudalistic country to a modern country in one generation. So like most of the world had like 400 years. Japan did it in like 40 years. So I think you do get some of this weird like spillover. Because now that I think about it with the harpy, it's like, yeah, a lot of Japanese demons, like especially their women, have like deflated breasts because it's the whole like, no longer like a young mother. It's like what's terrifying, the opposite, showing like old age and stuff like that. So I'm not too surprised this was like the Japanese going, yeah, I got this.
But since we talked about the legacy, before we move on from the scene, a few more words to Robin Hood. I think the conversation there also was like Robin Hood might have also not Robin Hood might have been more a character like Cully, and just through the songs and the lore is this glorified person who like stole from the poor, stole from the rich, and gave it to the poor. Because in the book it also said that Cully made up 30 songs about himself that were glorifying him, and he wasn't that person. But as the legacy lives on, other people repeating those songs will believe in that created fake character, and then believe Cully was like that, even though in real life she wasn't. That's like kind of also what they say at different points in the movie. It's like no person's actually how they are, how they appear. So it's like the fake appearance, and it happens in multiple like scenes. But yeah, I don't know, Steve. Anything else in that scene, that because that was a pretty long stretch in the book with Robin Hood? Anything you want to add there, Steve?
No, I think you covered it very, very succinctly there. So thank you for that. And Josh, I think, covered the reasoning behind the tree fairly well too.
I was about to say, to piggyback on that idea though, because what's interesting is like, what's his name? God, there's a millionaire who's big in Pittsburgh. It's going to drive me nuts. And it's like, if you look at his actual history, he was not a great dude. Carnegie. But people know of him now because he built libraries. He built all these stuff to change his legacy. And it's like you constantly kind of see that where it's like, yeah, they were a villain in real life. You know, a couple hundred years, a story will outlive the actual person. So it's kind of like, yeah, was Robin Hood like sleek, sexy, robbing from the poor or robbing from the rich to get to the poor? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe it was. And I think that's kind of the idea too, because it's like, you know, Mama Fortune, if the harpy ever, you know, she's going to get bigger and bigger. It's not going to be this squatting old lady. It's going to be this giant figure. Because who knows how long the harpy, like she captured the harpy.
Yeah, how long was it in there? But then through that scene with the burglar, with the bandit, you get Molly Grew being introduced. And then through her, we get directions to King Haggard and the Red Bull. So they actually know where they're going now. Before they were wandering around. And she's like, well, you're going the wrong way. And then we actually get to see the Red Bull for the first time, and the transformation and the realization of the unicorn when she turns human. Holy shit, what have you done?
I can feel this body dying all around me. It's like, you know, I mean, yes, but I didn't need that reminder. Like, I didn't need the Mike Tyson punch to my face.
But then this is the one part that is like, oh no, one of the many parts that is like, this is not a kid movie, because this is so deep philosophical. The difference between humans and animals is that humans are aware they exist and they are aware they will die. Like a cow doesn't know it's going to die at some point. Like the lifespan is limited. No other. I don't think any other animal. I don't know. It's like the most intelligent animal, like chimpanzees or dolphins or elephant. I don't know if they are aware their death is coming at some point. So this is. But for humans, this is every adult knows that. As a kid, you have to go through the process. So there's a slow process of you growing up and your first exposure to death, like whether it's a grandparent dying or someone else, like you get slow exposure to your mortality. In that case, you have a unicorn being transformed like that, and now all of this hammers in at once. So I can see why this reaction is like that. And it's so, to me, accurate and like just mind-blowing that, yeah, this is probably how someone would feel who's not aware of his own mortality if you were just exposed to it at some point as an adult without having gone through that process as a kid, and parents explaining slowly, people die, everything dies, blah, blah, blah. So just being confronted with it at once.
I think the other thing is, too, because I remember talking to my mentor about this, where it's like, you get so used to seeing the world from how you see it, where it's like, even if you like, because they've talked about, it's like, even if you got like ported into another body, you mentally couldn't handle it because it's like you're like, let's say you're 6 foot tall and the other person's 5'9". Everything in the world is going to change by that 1 inch. So like skewing, so it's like you don't, one, it's like completely changing her anatomy and body. So it's like mentally, but two, it's like how frail, especially the crazy thing as a kid, you feel invincible. Like, it's like, oh, I'm tired. Let me go run. I'll feel better. As an adult, especially when you get an injury where you're like, oh, how do I fix this? It's like, no, this is now your life. Like, it's like, this is now part of you. There's no, put a cast on 6 months later, you're good. It's like, this is now who you are, is this injury. It's like, you got to maintain and keep it up. It's like, good luck.
And it takes time to come to that realization. Some people don't realize it at all. Like, it takes months. So you see people that should have no business of doing certain exercises anymore still doing them because they still feel young and fresh. People in their 90s driving the car where they shouldn't because they want to cling on to the one thing that makes them happy.
Well, it's also hard. It's like, because the thing with Mama Fortuna, man, I did not believe I would be talking about this character this much. She's almost like at a certain zen because she's like, I accept my fate. Like, I know it's like I'm enjoying this moment because I know it won't last. Whereas with the Bandit King, whatever, not Craig. Anyway,
Cully.
Because Cully, he's trying to convince everyone else about like trying to cement his legacy. He's not enjoying the moment. Because like
he's in the peak, or what he considers peak.
And also, I think the other thing that's kind of terrifying about the Red Bull, the only personality is rage with that thing. Like anger, cunning, and rage. Because it's like, it's the most animalistic out of all. There's even a heartbeat reason. The Red Bull doesn't.
Yeah.
Ow.
The unicorn now being called Lady Amalthea, in human form, hates it. Molly hates it. But there's nothing to be done about it.
Because like also with the heartbeat, both are off of Greek mythology. It's a fun fact. Because Amalfi was. Who was she?
To cut a long story short, I've heard that story now like 3-4 times from Peter S. Beagle, but he takes 10 minutes explaining it. So long story short is Amalthea is the name of the goat that raised Zeus. And Zeus, as a kid, by accident, broke one horn off of that goat.
Okay.
Technically, that goat was the first unicorn. Peter Beagle said he didn't even know, like the name just came to him and he remembered, but he didn't remember that it was the goat that kind of had a broken off horn, and it kind of coincidentally named the unicorn figure after it.
I do find it interesting because it's like, I guess the other thing that's interesting about mortality is like you get a name and a personality. Or not a personality, sorry, you get a name and an identity. Because before she was the unicorn. And now she's
Yep. And now we're skipping a lot because in the book, like the movie skips, not we didn't have anything to do with making this movie. The movie skips a lot. In the book, they get through a town called Hexgate. Hexgate is the closest town to the castle. The curse that and again, this is like, I wish this movie was half an hour longer because they could explain the curse and like all of that, where Prince Lear comes from and all the backstory around him. That's all based in Hexgate.
Where you could have spent even a few minutes explaining the prophecy and why Lear has the origins he does.
Yeah, that isn't even clear in the movie. I think at some point Haggard says, "Oh yeah, he's not my son," or like Lear says also, like, "I know he's not my father," but yeah.
I do feel like, okay, I love the beginning, especially the circus. The forest I'm kind of I do enjoy the ending, but I do feel like it's like, man, this could use a little bit more editing. Because even like I said, I love those opening scenes with her in the forest. It's like we could have nipped off like a minute here, a couple minutes everywhere to give us a little bit more with Haggard in the castle. And I
mean, not
agree,
even you don't need to cut anything out. Like this movie is only 1.5 hours. You can easily add half an hour, and if you really wanted another hour, like I know then it doesn't get into the kid movie category anymore. But
No, but still, any one of the Chronicles of Narnia books was much longer than this. I'm not 100% sure, but I think when BBC was doing the adaptations, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, for example, is not that long, but that was almost 2 hours when they adapted that into live action the first time around.
I will say this though, now especially because they did what's known as 2-in-1 animation. So traditional animation is 24 frames per second. A lot of Japanese studios do 2-in-1, which is 12 frames per second. So that's why it's like it feels a little bit stiff. But then they'll do stuff like the Red Bull, the unicorns at the end. They'll do that as a true 24. So it's like that's where they spend their money on. So it's like the problem is every minute you add for animation costs a fortune too. That's the other problem.
Yeah, makes sense. They had the budget that they had. They already cut down on the frames. So yeah, you can't add another half an hour.
Because yeah, I feel like the other problem with the Haggard section, it starts off cool, especially with the kicking out the magician, but then it's like you have a lot of scenes of like nothing really feels like it's happening because all like you don't get to see things, you're told things. Even like the prince trying to get with the Lady Amalfi, I'm like, it didn't really give me like a good scene of them like hoarding like her slowly warming up to him. I mean, they had that awkward song, but it's like I don't know, it just didn't feel like it hit there.
It dragged too long, almost.
No, and whereas when the unicorn is on her initial stint of her journey, you see time passing by, and you can recognize within the walls of the castle, time is passing by because you're seeing the degradation of the unicorn's mind and her complete transformation into this human Amalthea. It's not as obvious to the viewer unless you're really paying attention to that. You got to see the seasons change with the initial stint of the journey. You don't get to see that while she's in the castle, even though you can theorize that months pass by for her to really get out of her own head and warm up to Lear, and for Lear to realize, oh, she's not really after these fantastic feats. She wants something a little bit deeper.
Yeah, in the book, it's like, does she forget? Well, it's clarified in there, but I think Lear thinks like, oh, the less she remembers from being a unicorn. Oh no, the more she is in love with Lear, the more she forgets being a unicorn. And then Molly is like, nah, it's the other way around. I think it was Molly. Like, no, because she forgets that he was a unicorn, that's why she falls in love with Lear. And in the movie, it's not even that clear that they are that much. I mean, no, at some point during the song, they kiss, so they gotta be in love. But like, again, maybe also from a kid's perspective back then, I was like, what is happening? Like, how much time is passing? Why does she forget she was a unicorn? Like,
I feel like the other thing with the whole King Haggard situation, because it's like, I'm always like, is he dead broke? Or did he make these choices on purpose? Like, but it's like, I get like maybe the book talks about it. And I bring that up because it's like him and his son are the only guards. So it's kind of like, okay, how much are they pretending to be like a king, even though they have more of the title? Or is it like he is such a flint, because it definitely changes who the character is.
I think he mentions that once, but it's so easy to miss. So he has a staff of like 4 guards, so he has 4 knights protecting the castle. They are way too old. In the book, they actually appear and they talk, they have dialogue, and they have some role to play as well. In the movie, it's just mentioned in like one sentence that he has 4 folks that are around, but you never see them. The second part is, again, they don't explain the curse, so you don't know why everything is. I mean, they mention the curse briefly in the beginning, but by the time they get to the castle, I don't think it's that present in your mind anymore. So that's why everything is withered down. And then third is nothing makes him happy, therefore he doesn't have any possessions either. The only thing that makes him happy are the unicorns, the fact that he captured them.
Now, one thing I did find interesting about this, that I feel like this is a little bit more relatable nowadays than it is back when this movie came out, him capturing the unicorns. AKA him hoarding a resource that everyone used to enjoy. Because it's
Plus, he didn't do it himself. He sent the Red Bull to do it, even though the Red Bull isn't working for him, but it's the one favor he does for him, I guess.
That's the other kind of weird.
Whatever is never explained.
Because it's like, is the Red Bull like a part of him? Like is this the whole Mama Toon thing where it's like he captured the Red Bull, he controls it? Because it feels like the Red Bull is just like the MacGuffin, where it's like, you don't think about too much. Red Bull just makes sure unicorns are in here.
That's the one thing that's never explained. So they only explained the Red Bull appeared with King Haggard. King Haggard came from over the sea. So he arrived by sea and then took over the land, became king, had a witch, built a castle, didn't pay the witch. The witch castle fell on King Haggard, and then Hexgate, the city close by as well, because the townsmen didn't want to help the witch to get the money from King Haggard. And then the Red Bull is just there. He doesn't work for the Red Bull doesn't work for him, yet they have this weird relationship where he's like, well, the only thing that makes me happy is the unicorns, and the Red Bull, I guess, just goes off and captures them, but he does so by his own will. And in the end as well, like the Red Bull, like if the unicorns were kept in the sea and easily could have escaped at any point, the Red Bull was gone, the unicorns come out, right? The Red Bull is driven into the sea. What prevents the Red Bull from coming out other than King Haggard now being dead? So it's maybe that's why the movie stops. Another sequel could explore where the Red Bull has gone and if he comes back or not, or if he goes with King Haggard, but it's never explained anymore.
I had always thought that the Red Bull was a part of him or vice versa, because you can see, and obviously it's because he's got some form of dementia and he's frail and losing things, but as he's staring at Amalthea from time to time, you see his eyes glow a little bit of red on the outside, and it's when he's recognizing her as this unicorn, the way that the Red Bull was staring her down with that same look, that recognizing that he needs to have her at the same way that Haggard is looking at her, the Red Bull looks at her. So I always thought that they were one and the same. He just had this ability to utilize whatever magic he had to transform whatever it was into the Red Bull and then send that part of himself out into the world to capture the thing that brought him joy, which was stealing away these unicorns, these mythical creatures that could bring hope and beauty into the world. That's just how I saw it.
Yeah, and again, we were like at this part of the movie now. So this movie is very metaphorical, right? This is part of, okay, there's this one video that talked about death and legacy, and I mentioned it's only 30% of it. To me, there's a huge other spectrum of the meaning of this movie, which is what Josh, you mentioned like probably an hour ago by now. I wanted to wait until we get to this point, because going through all the different steps, you can connect them metaphorically to like a coming of age story. You have the unicorn with the apparently warning by the first hunter in the forest in the beginning, right? It's like, stay where you are. This is no world for you. Pay no mind to young girls, for they only become silly old women. Then curiosity is awoken in the unicorn and it ventures out. So it goes out and you have basically the butterfly giving another warning, but also more information. Then she meets Mommy Fortuna, who is basically everything your parents warned you about. Coming of age, growing older, And Mommy Fortuna then, well, the first bad experience there. But then she set out to find the other unicorns, which is like her beginning of independence. And then she meets her companions, Schmendrick and Molly, like her friends in her life as a teenager, older teenager. The transformation to being a human is basically becoming a teenager, a young adult, and slowly forgetting about your childhood. Like you have other movies like Inside Out exploring that pretty well, where when you grow older, you forget about being a kid and having those thoughts and that joy. And that's kind of what Amalthea is going through when she forgets ever being a unicorn. She meets the prince, it's her first love. Not remembering being a unicorn again goes further and further away from that. The Red Bull then is reigning with fear. He never touches, he doesn't fight. In the book, they actually say the Red Bull does not fight, it only intimidates. And it will not fight the unicorn. That's how the unicorn in the end can drive it back, but not with actual power. So the Red Bull doesn't have power over her, which is for her, the turn of her against the Red Bull is her emancipation of her parents or of the authorities. And then transforming back into a unicorn, but with the benefit of having regret now, is being an adult and accepting your past and everything you've gone through and now remembering your youth again. So to me, this is even the bigger story than the how they deal with death. But there's so many layers. It's just one additional layer to me that, well, the more and more I thought about it, like, yeah, this is her transformation from a kid, teenager to an adult.
So let's talk about what Josh thinks the Red Bull is. No, I think what's kind of interesting with any story, because it's like you can have something be a metaphor for the story, but like in that story, it's a real thing. Like Mama Fatu is like, yeah, she's a metaphor for like old age, death, but it's like she's a real witch. She's a real crinkly old woman with a raven on her skull. The Red Bull, like, I don't know. I feel like it's part of Hagrid's will, but it's not Hagrid. And I say that because it's like if it was Hagrid, because you get the idea he's always bored. It's like, well, if he could be the Red Bull, would he find entertainment in that? I almost feel like, I don't know. I feel like the more I watch it too, where he's like, he should, like, anyone else would be excited about owning the Red Bull. He's just like, it's another thing. It doesn't do it for me. That said, though, when the unicorn transforms into a human, I think the big thing is because they always talk about, like, in a lot of stories, the joys of mortality, because you actually get to experience like joy, sorrow, and especially because, like, we're going way deep in here, but let me cook. Because if you look at like Elon Musk, at one point was one of the richest people in the world. But it's like, how much joy does that guy actually know? Because it's like, if he wants like a steak, he's going to get a steak. It's like he doesn't know want or desire. So it's like, he never has to save up or work or gets to enjoy something once a year. So I think that's the same way with the unicorns. They have infinite health, infinite youth, so they don't know the joys of, like, a summer day, because it's like, well, no, this is how it is. So when they're confronted with Red Bull, they don't know to fight back, because they're like, well, okay, what's the difference? Me living in the ocean and living here, it's like, I don't know anything else. I'll just kind of follow where with Amalfi, she has regret, especially because the prince gets killed. And she knows anger, she knows human emotions, so she can actually fight back. And I think the thing with the Red Bull is he's kind of in the same boat. He's just this immortal where it's like, I don't know anything different, so I don't want to, like, oof. Especially like size-wise, it's like there's no contest, but she can scare him back into the ocean because he's just like, I don't know what's going on, lady. I just work here. Literally, that, like, him backing into the ocean is the equivalent of I just work here. Because the other question is, with all the unicorns, are they happy being out of the ocean? Like, how much joy do they actually feel?
Or if they were happy, they would have stayed there, right? Like, I feel I agree with what you say, but apply to King Haggard. Like he's the one who has everything but doesn't feel joy in anything, and therefore makes dumb decisions. By like he knows, like he has this other magician that is like a way better magician than Schmendrick, but he decides he would keep or replace him with Schmendrick because he didn't make him happy. So maybe an incompetent magician will make him happy. Let's try it out. I don't have anything to lose.
Here's the difference between Haggard and the unicorns. Haggard is miserable. And this is where it gets a weird concept. The unicorns aren't anything. Like they're almost
like emotionless.
Yeah.
They're like they just are.
Because I remember in the death in the one video I posted it, but there's a line from the book that talked about like she was running and running, and in the blink of an eye realized that like all of a sudden it's like it's been hundreds of years since this incident, but she just remembers it even though they've been dead for hundreds of years. Because I think that's the thing with like you get the idea with the unicorn at the beginning when she's just a unicorn. Time has no meaning because nothing has meaning. It's like the mountains have always been here, the forest has been here. I'm just here. Whereas as Amalfi, it's like, yeah, she feels regret, but she can actually now enjoy, like she knows what love is, and that's joy. So it's like there's a price to this.
So she doesn't want to be turned into a unicorn because she would lose that. As a human, she has love, she has Prince Lear, and she does actually not want to be turned into a unicorn in the end. It's Prince Lear who then says, no, you have to, because the story cannot end here. Like, that's the whole speech. I don't recall it all, but like the whole speech with the happy endings, right? Like, there can't be a happy ending in the middle of the story. Or, no, that's what Schmendrick adds after he says that. Like, there can't be happy endings because there are no end, nothing ever ends. But Prince Lear actually says, like, no, I don't know, he uses different metaphors there as well, but him basically saying this story cannot end here. The hero has to go all the way through the end. I have to sacrifice like the love for the happy ending.
So I know it's in Doctor Who, especially with the episode of the Scarecrows, because he puts his memory away. I swear there's another show and it's driving me nuts with a young woman, like an animated one. I can't think of it. But there's always that moment where it's like the person who's like missing the memories or whatever, like the new individual is starting to become their own individual. So the question is, it's like, whose life is worth more, the original or the like new individual?
Could be the Tron Princess.
Which one?
The Tron Princess, because he turned into a Tron and she can't remember her.
No, it might have been. I swear this was like an anime or something. Just it's bugging me because I know with the Doctor Who he talks about it. Because it's like, because he says he's like, I don't want to be this doctor. He sounds miserable. Why can't I enjoy my current life? Yeah, was it? Might have been Farscape. Think about it. Anyway, but there's been multiple times of that where the question is, it's like, whose life is worth more, the original or now the new? Because it's like the original doesn't know what happened to the person. It's a foreign concept to them. They have their own. They're making their own choices. So it's like, which life is worth living a little bit more? Oh. Gosh.
So King Haggard definitely has everything. He's still depressed. He's the personification of depression at this point. Like he's like, nothing makes me happy. Whatever. I'm willing to risk my life, just to see how things go. He knows Lady Amalthea is the unicorn. I think in the beginning he said I was wondering at first, I was questioning it, but you reveal yourself. Like I can tell you're a unicorn. So he knows he's a unicorn. He knows he's come to free the others, even though she doesn't remember. And he lets them live with him anyway.
I won't lie though, that one kind of bugs me because even rewatching it, there's no hints he knows who she is. And you could do that there's a couple ways to do it. So it just feels like all of a sudden he's like, I've known all along. It's like, have you?
I mean, the only hint is that she keeps looking at the ocean, kind of having the same connection.
Now, what's
and again, in the book, it's those hints are seeded in the book where he's like, where I think Prince Leia says, there are two women and a man coming, and he's like, no, there's one man and one woman coming. I have no idea what the third one is. Like in the book, it's laid out. All of that is cut out from the movie. Well,
what they could have done in this movie, and it pisses me off, like to no extent. So, like, okay, the unicorn definitely has a pupil, whatever, but make that like a purplish pupil when she gets turned human, because Haggard looks into her eyes and sees like the forest, right?
That's the indication in the movie where he's like, I can't see myself, I see forest.
But I'm saying, don't give her a pupil where all of a sudden she becomes more and more human, where she starts getting like a black pupil. Because then it's like, that's a visual cue. It's like, you can kind of tell off the bat, it's like, oh man, that pupil is a lot more defined in this scene than it was 5 minutes ago. Like, just visual things like that gives you a little like hint or clue.
Yeah.
Like I said, I feel like I love this movie, and I definitely want to get the Blu-ray. I just feel like the part with Haggard, it's like, man, this could have used another pass on the like writing, like just because even like give me some conversations with like Haggard and Svendrick, or something. Just give me something a little bit more. And every time I watch this, I think that dragon is fake, because I'm like, oh, this is like the imagination, and he comes back with it. I'm like, oh, it's a real dragon.
If you tell the Japanese to draw a dragon, they draw a Chinese dragon.
Yeah.
So that's the only one they know. There's no medieval dragon. But no, in the book, that's one thing that not only King Haggard, Prince Leia, in the book where it's so laid out how he tries to get how Lady Amalthea's attention by slaying 5 dragons, and he comes back with the head and like presents it to her, and she's like, and like does all those other things, and he asks Molly like, what else can I do? I've like fought all those knights, killed all those dragons that usually work, and that to be fleshed out better than just a montage. For like a minute in the movie, that could have been half an hour by itself as well. Like just their interactions in the castle, like just how they live together, like how do they actually fall in love? The movie brushes over it so fast, like you don't fall in love like that. So interactions between Prince Leia and Amalthea and Molly, who is kind of helping him out a little bit. She doesn't want to like disappoint him, so she also tells him stuff like, I don't even try, just do your other thing, I don't want to encourage you, but then he does it anyways, writes her poems, and then as she forgets that she was a unicorn, like kind of gets more on that track. But
let's be honest though too, is this Molly's dream that she can live through Lady Amalfi? Because it's like she might be able to marry a prince and become a princess, like that. Because the idea of like usually the idea of like, if you see a unicorn, you're destined for like happiness and stuff like that.
Interesting.
So it's like, that kind of fits along with the whole Robin Hood, where it's like, yeah, there's the myth of marrying a prince, and here's the reality where it's like he's a dude living with his dad in like the worst looking castle known to man.
Like Lady Amalthea is a projection of Molly's desire to marry the prince.
It's like,
so in the book, there's a scene between them venturing out after the bandit and before facing the Red Bull for the first time, where Molly Schmendrick and the unicorn encounter like a ceremony. And at this point, like again, I like read the book and watched. Well, no, it's not in the movie, but like it had to be pointed out. I didn't realize that, and it's in the comic, and so the IDW comic is in there as well. I didn't realize it, but the guy. So there's a wedding party, and the guy who's supposed to get married to this princess is Prince Leia, and the princess basically says that she does a speech. Apparently, that's normal around princes or virgins of higher status to call the unicorns. Like, if there's a unicorn, show yourself, blah, 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 like a more poetic way. Show yourself, like, put your head in my lap, and like, I'm here for you. And then Molly and Schmendrick actually question the unicorn why she didn't reveal herself. And she's like, I've done it in the past. I want a mission here. But if you're Molly, you could see, because they see Prince Leia at this point already, and his soon-to-be wife basically having this speech. And that it never been alluded to later on. They never explained it in a book or in a comic or anywhere else. What happened to his soon-to-be wife? Where did she go? Like, they were about to get married. Because the unicorn only shows herself to, like, I guess, virgin. So that's why it was before the marriage. They were about to get married. The unicorn doesn't come out. And she's like, there's actually some cool lines in there. It's like, why didn't you go there? It's like unicorn saying, she would have been more disappointed than seeing a dragon, for no one makes promises to a dragon. Like, she makes a promise to the unicorn. But again, at this point, it could have broken off of Molly's projection to what you said, because you have them seeing Prince Leia before they actually get to the castle.
Also, there's definitely a problem with the different mediums, because like with a movie, in some ways, is closer to a novella, where it's like, hey, here's an idea, but you only have like a limited set number of pages. Whereas a book, it's like, it can be a series, because it's like, yeah, it's all under one book, but it's like, could you split this up into 3, 4, whatever? So it's like, I understand like not introducing that whole aspect, but I do feel like, I don't know, especially like, and it's Hagrid being like, he's not my child, I found him on the doorstep. It's like, yeah, it makes more sense with a prophecy. It's like, oh yeah, that. Whereas in the movie, you're like, okay, that's a fact.
And that's where the whole curse of Hexgate comes. Like, they didn't. So the people of Hexgate, being cursed as well, decide not to have kids. So the curse would not be broken, because the curse also said it will be broken by someone of our own. They find, or one guy finds like a baby in a snowy night, and then it doesn't pick it up, but leaves it there to die, hoping that it wouldn't come, because they're, again, breaking the fourth wall, or like they made her realizing he's in a fairy tale. He's like, well, if that isn't the hero that will bring King Haggard down, I'll be there, because that's basically how fairy tales go. So I'll leave that thing out to die, and then King Haggard finds the kid.
That's a classic in like mythology and stuff, where it's like,
that's why it's making fun of fairy tales of fantasy, which is like another angle. Like, this book has so many layers, the movie as well, but the story has so many layers.
I also think with, I don't know why, with Rankin Bass films, especially their fantasy ones. Now, I haven't seen Return of the King, but they kind of always drop the ball at the end, where it's like, you almost get the sense where it's like the budget's been ran out. It's like, how do we, because I love Flight of the Dragons, the fun film, but like the final conflict is two dudes talking. There always is that feeling where it's like, I don't know, I'm always like, I want a little bit more here. Like, something like, I don't know, it's like, this wasn't, it's like, give me a little bit more. And it's like, oh, that's the movie. It's like, okay. Also, it's a little thing. I kind of, it's cheesy, but like Animal House, I cannot believe I'm comparing Animal House to The Last Unicorn. But in Animal House, they do this whole, I guess you would call it a montage, but it's like, hey, this character went on to be senator, blah, blah, blah. This character's in jail, blah, blah, blah. This character's dead. I kind of wish you got something like that with Molly and Schmendrick, even if it was like still images during the credits, like, this is where the life was, this is where everything went. Then have the last shot just be like the unicorn's still in her forest. You could even take a shot from the beginning of the movie and repeating it on there. But it's like, I think that would have been a better end cap than just kind of like unicorn being like, "I'm out, bitches."
They're brushing over it in the movie a little bit too fast. In the book, they have a song, that's how the book ends, where it's very clear that now Schmendrick and Molly are like in love and go off together and they stay together. So them basically being a couple now. The movie does something else though. I don't know if anyone caught it. The cat from the castle survives. Like it's there for like, I don't know, 10 frames. I didn't see it at first. Like someone pointed it out. I think it was the audio track pointed out. I had to go back and watch the movie or that scene. So the one-eyed cat, oh no, well, has two eyes, just has the eye patch. But the cat from the castle doesn't die in the collapse of the castle.
I mean, it got 9 wives.
Yeah. But it's also nothing that was in the script. That was Japanese animators that didn't want to kill the cat. So they animated back on the back of the horse when Schmendrick lifts Molly onto the horse. The cat lays on the back of the horse. And you only see it for like 10 frames or so. But it's just something the animators like, no, the cat survived. Okay, anyone else? But the cat survives. And it stays with them. And then you see also the raven flying in. So they collect the animals as they go, I guess, to stick with them.
Do you know the whole yokai thing with cats?
Nope.
Jordan? You know what a yokai is?
Mm-mm.
Yes.
Do you know what anime? No. So yokai is a Japanese. It's technically like a demon, but it's a folklore creature. So it's like the problem with when you say demon, you automatically assume hell, evil. It's like it's not. Mm-hmm. It depends on the monster, but it's a monster. In Japanese myth, the older a cat gets, the more powerful it gets. So, like, if a cat lives to a certain age, it grows 2 tails. If it it gets to a certain age, it grows like 3, 4, even to the point of like human speech, walking upright. So it's like, I think some of the stuff with the cat, when you're talking about with the Japanese, it's like, yeah, it makes sense if you're looking at it through like their culture. Because it's like, yeah, talking cat isn't that big of a deal in Japanese culture. Like, it's an established trope in Japanese culture.
That's why I put so much attention to it. Like again, the moving the iPad came from the animator. Animating it back in the movie later on came from the animator. So they really wanted to. They had fun with the cat. Again, this goes back to like, if you have people who care for something, you get cool stuff.
Then, I don't know why, but like, that cat definitely feels very Studio Ghibli. Like, I could see that cat in a Ghibli film.
Yeah.
Well, sadly, I think we've come to the end of our run. I kind of hit all the points I wanted to talk about.
Well, I will say that despite the fact that Peter was not a huge fan of this film at first, it doesn't really matter, because at the end of the day, some products take on lives of their own and leave their own legacy. That's why I always make the argument that Star Wars and Harry Potter are bigger than their creators and they can do whatever the heck they want. But at some point, the fans are going to decide whether or not this passes on and leaves a legacy. In this film, the book, they've left a legacy. But it is always kind of funny to go back and revisit it, because I'll revisit the book typically, or the IDW comic that was published. I think it was in 2010. That collected edition, it's up there. I've seen it sell for $250 before on auction. But Beagle has to this day said he hated Alan Arkin's portrayal of Schmendrick, said he was too dry, didn't show enough emotion. He's praised Mia Farrow, so I do appreciate that. And for whatever reason, I don't know, maybe he's showing his age, but for a while he was considering licensing this for a Broadway show, because Fergie, when she was with Josh Duhamel, had praised this as her all-time favorite childhood book, and she was willing to license it from Beagle. And at one point he was considering it, but this was back in 2015 where I read that article, and to this day we haven't seen it, so we may never see a Broadway show by Fergie.
I think 2015 was the beginning of the abuse his former manager unleashed on Beagle. That through a lawsuit, he only came out a few years ago and got the license back. But as bad as that manager treated him, I don't think we would have had a lot of things without him. Like there's a lot of things that got pushed by him, like anniversary editions and the screenings and all of that stuff. The commentary track, documentary about the making of, and then whatnot. That's all part. I bought the movie on Apple TV or iTunes or whatever they call it nowadays, and you have it in the extras. I don't know. It's probably coming from the DVD. So if you have the DVD or Blu-ray, it's probably part of that as well.
Yeah, they went back for the Blu-ray and they put together all new special features because the Blu-ray was put together partially as a celebration of Beagle overcoming those issues. It's one of those things that people have kind of fought for Criterion to get a hold of and do a 4K remastering, but nothing as of yet. But they select some pretty interesting films years after the push for that has died down. So who knows? We may actually see that. I think the Blu-ray has stellar quality. That's probably the footage you got to watch tour. I think the restoration's beautiful, but I think there's a little bit more that can be pulled. And they didn't include some of the lost animatics out there because there were other characters featured in the book that were meant to make appearances in the movie, and they actually did have animatics crafted for that as well. And at one point, they were going to adapt some of the short stories, but again, these legal issues came up with the creator, so who knows if we'll ever see that again. And I honestly don't feel it would really be the same with a different animation style anyway.
So that's the biggest question for movies of that age. Should there be a remake? And not only necessarily talking about an animated movie, like should there be a live action remake?
Oh, well, quick thing. I'm also curious if we didn't get the Broadway thing, because I think the Spider-Man Broadway, when that tanked, I think that killed like a lot of projects.
But this was after the Spider-Man Broadway show.
That's what I'm saying. I'm thinking like that might have scared investors away, where it's like, we're good. You know what? I can't believe I'm saying this, because I don't like live action remakes. I wouldn't mind a live action quote unquote remake if it was closer to the book.
I'd be game for that.
Because I feel like, the other thing is like the backgrounds, and the other thing I love about animation, like I always prefer animation over live action, because like in animation, everything is a decision, like from the props, the cups, to like the grains, grass. Whereas like with live action, especially nowadays, like the lighting, a lot of it just feels lazy. So it's like, it would be cool to see some of these moments in live action, but it's like, the other problem is, okay, the heartbeat to me is the heartbeat. It's like, how much of the heartbeat would they have to change in a live action? Not just like the three boobs, like even like the floppy ears, like the like gnarly. I think that's the other thing with this animation. Like nothing looks older than a Rankin Bass character. Like they're like Haggard has seen, like you're like, that is a hard life. Because even like Molly feels a lot older than Schmendrick.
Looks like 60. But then the harpy doesn't even look like how it's described in the book, or how a harpy should look like, for that matter. But now I'm with you. Like, you should not make a remake of a masterpiece, and I consider this movie to be a masterpiece. But in this case, yes, 100%. I want to remake a live action remake, a longer one, more accurate to the book, at least PG-13 version, not a kids movie. Like, I want the book to be remade. Maybe a two-parter. Make two movies. Make one part up to the point where they get to the castle, and then the second movie from where they are in the castle, and the rest of it. But this could be such a good medieval movie, like a Game of Thrones, well, from regards to the like visual.
Could also
Maybe
be a
make it even
miniseries.
R-rated. If they would make a remake, it's never going to be R-rated. But make it a PG-13 at least. Real life, more like feel like you're in this world. And I mean, if you want to keep this stuff of like breaking the fourth wall, there can be some comedy in there. But definitely, I want to have a real like live action remake of the book.
So I
It's
also
fun,
feel,
but it has a miniseries and a movie.
I'll just say no one wants to do this because it's that too expensive and you probably wouldn't get a great return, but like a 3-part miniseries would be good with this. Like you said, a 2-part movie.
Wouldn't have the budget. This one needs a lot of budget. If you put like a lot of, by which I think it would warrant it. This one has a fan base already. It's a known property. You could pump this up. Like you could make this huge.
My only fear is, especially it's so dumb, but it being like unicorn, it's like no, this has to be kids. This has to be like there's a certain like anchor now with the term unicorn.
And the movie contributed to it. So again, I don't know how much there is like truth there is to this, but apparently prior to this movie, there was no female unicorn. All unicorns were considered male or like non-gender, but all unicorns described in mythology are male. And stories about unicorns were male. This movie introduced the female unicorn. And nowadays, if you think of a unicorn, of course, it's female, right? Like, there's rainbows and there's feminine. It's funny that, like, I don't know if this movie contributed to it, probably a little bit.
I mean,
but
that always
this
happens.
Yeah, it's a phenomenon. So I don't know if you could revert that. But still, I mean, she still has to be female in the movie. It's just you could make it way darker. Like, especially Haggard. The castle in Heckgate, this could be super dark.
Well, I also feel like just because I always feel like with Haggard, especially rewatching this, he always feels like he's like way up north where it's like this isn't good farming ground. It's very rocky. Like the terrain matches his mood. Like it's constantly stormy. Like it's not a pleasant place to be.
But that's the curse. Like nothing will grow until he's gone. That's why the moment he dies, like stuff starts growing. And actually, with the unicorns coming out, his henchmen basically they are in the beginning when we're introduced to them, they are like 60, 70 years old, and then the unicorns escape, and suddenly they're like in their 20s. Kind of read.
Because I feel like explaining the curse, like that was some of those things that would have helped the end of this movie a little bit more. Because then it's like, it just, I don't know, they kind of feel like they're going through the motions where all of a sudden it's like, oh, we've been here long enough. Let's wrap this story. Especially because like you see the clock once, but it's like they really could have shown that clock a lot more, like alluded to it. Like, why isn't the time right? It's like, oh, I don't know. It's this old piece my father keeps.
I love that speech by the scholar. Like, what's the right time? It's like, it's now. Now is the right time. Kind of again, breaking the fourth wall. Like for you, like get your ass up, do what you want to do now. Never the right time otherwise. The right time is what you make it time. It's an illusion. Like you can't treat it like something set in stone. But yeah, they have a whole different angle. So Schmendrick, I don't think this is mentioned in the movie. He's immortal because his former master, I think they say it in one sentence, but they don't go too deep into it. But his former master, he knew that he had so much magic in him. He just didn't know how to untap it, unleash it, or like use it. That he made him immortal for him to have enough time to master his profession. And basically, with turning the unicorn back into its original shape, he became mortal. So it is again like the trope that you see in, I don't know, comic books like The Many Deaths of Layla Starr, like stuff that I asked Graham V and Philip Andrade, like if you could choose, would you want to be immortal? The answer that they gave me was a little bit disappointing, but I think this movie answers it differently as well. Like I think for you to appreciate what you have, it has to die at some point.
Did you ever see Sandman off of Netflix?
No.
Have you ever read Sandman?
I've started it. I have the collection. I haven't finished it.
So there's a character in, I forget his name, but he's technically immortal. It's just death has never come for him. And it's interesting because you see, like, I think he made the deal with Dream in like 1300s.
Oh, Shakespeare.
Yeah. No, not Shakespeare. It's
It said at the same time.
Yeah. It's every 100 years or so they meet at this bar. And it's always interesting because it's like he's at top of the world. And like the next 100 years, he's like broke. Because he even says, he's like, do you know how hungry one can get when one can't die? So Dream's like, oh, so you want to die? And he's like, oh, no, I put in the time now. I'm bound to rebound, you know. But it's always interesting. He's always an interesting because I feel like most immortals are like, almost like Dracula in a castle, like, oh, life is boring. It's, you know, endless time. Whereas with him, he feels more human because he's like, I don't know what's around the next corner.
If you wanted to be immortal, Josh, if you could be immortal, would you choose to be immortal?
The hard thing with that is because it's like, you know, what are the catches with it? But the problem is, like, everyone you see, you know, is going to die. Like, you know, do they remember? Like, would you remember them? Because it's like, you know, even from childhood, it's like you don't remember your friends and such. On the other hand, there's a lot of shit I want to draw. Probably not, just because it's one of those. Like, I'm not religious anymore, and I don't know what's on the other side, but it's like I can't imagine it's just like nothingness. So it's like, you know, at some point, it's like variety's the spice of life.
Like Watchmen, you're the last one. You're just sitting there on the moon or and watching, and like nothing else to do.
Because that's what I was saying. Death is the biggest, you know, that's the biggest shakeup.
Steve.
No, I'm good. I'm good just being here for the time I'm allotted, and then whatever happens.
James.
I gotta go with it. Whatever's happening. I don't really have any opinions, but
Torsten.
How about you, Tor?
It depends on the condition. I would always want to have a loophole. So if I was immortal, I would want to have a way to end it. Like, could I still die? Like, does immortality mean I just don't die naturally, or does it mean I can't be killed?
Well,
I'm not gonna. Otherwise,
it could just be like Smedrick. You're rendered immortal until you complete whatever goal that has been set before you, and then.
But again, what if you don't complete that goal? So what happens at the end of time, right? Or not the end of time? The world explodes and you're floating in space. Are you still alive? At some point, everything ends. At some point, the sun will go out. At some point, Earth will cease to exist. What happens to you? You're floating through space, or are you actually dead with that? Or prior to that, can you be killed?
I forget what it's called. There's an actual thing about this. It's like humans can comprehend like 100 people die, because it's like you can comprehend the horrors of that. You can't comprehend 1 million people dying, because it's like 1 million. You know, you can make it 5 million. Your brain just can't comprehend that number, like on a scale. I think that's a problem with eternity too, because it's like, what does living 5 billion years mean? It's like, I don't know. Because the other question is like, you know, let's go down crazy rabbit hole. Because, you know, there's so many stories of like immortals getting trapped in something where it's like, are they alive? Are they dead? You know, because at some point it's like you just jump into the deepest part of the ocean, and the pressure like just kind of collapses everything around you.
Yeah, that's why, like, what does immortality mean, right? Like, do you outlive the universe? If so, then yeah, heck no. Like, I don't want to be floating through space for eternity. if that's not the case, and there's actually an end at some point, which is not the definition of immortality, then no.
Go watch Doctor Who. That will explain all the questions.
There you go.
And give me more questions.
Yeah, more questions. So, one more question. What's the official national animal of Scotland?
Hedgehog? Oh, unicorn.
It's crazy. Like, unicorn's official animal is the unicorn.
Okay.
Fun fact.
All jokes aside, though, think about this. A horse with one horn is a mythical creature. But then we have giraffes.
And reindeers.
Yeah, but even like reindeers make some sense. Giraffes, it's like, how is this not a mythical creature?
Well, I think, isn't it like that's what they discuss in the audio commentary track as well? Like narwhals, I guess for the longest time, people didn't know narwhals existed, and they found the horn and thought that was from a unicorn until they found, I guess, a whole skeleton or something of a narwhal. I was like, okay, that's something else.
Fun fact, though, that's not a horn; that's a tooth.
Yes, yeah, it's a tusk. But when they first found it, they thought it was a horn, not a tusk.
It's so funny you bring that up because Beagle talked about that at his Otakon appearance back in 2011.
Yeah, I've read an interview with Beagle. I've listened to the audio track. I watched the documentary. And let me tell you, Beagle tells the same stories over and over on all different mediums. So I'm not surprised that on every single convention he probably talked about the same thing. Like, because at some point I was like, I've heard the story 4 times already, and I've only watched 4 different things about it. But Beagle talked about it.
It was also in the movie. The prince is going to go slay the dragon. They do it cleverly with the shadow to make the lance look like a unicorn. And then they show all the narwhals. So here's my question. You all enjoyed this movie? Because this was no one's first time watching it, right?
No.
I was scared to rewatch it, but I'm glad I did rewatch it. I'm glad I read the book. Or, well, to your credit, like, I listened to the audiobook. That said, I ordered the book physical form, so it's going to be in 2 weeks or something. It takes a while to ship. But yeah, no, I definitely don't regret rewatching it. I'm probably going to rewatch it very soon again. I'm probably going to read the book very soon again. I love it. I love the whole, there's so much stuff to uncover. It feels like we already uncovered so much, but there's so much hidden meaning in it that you can't, even in the 2.5 hours we've been doing this right now, like, can't even talk about everything that's in there.
It's also deep, and I can tell you, having met Beagle, that he said there's a lot more layers that your everyday fan that they don't get around to discussing. So this is probably something we could discuss for another couple hours.
Oh, completely.
To give me a restroom break, we can continue.
Nah,
we haven't.
No, because I got to cook dinner at some point.
Yeah, okay.
Also, not next month. Sometime down the line, I would like us to watch Flight of the Dragons.
Ooh, that's a good one.
There's about dragons.
Yes, and also, here's the thing: goofiest looking dragons you've ever seen. Then when you watch the movie, you're like, "Oh yeah, I can actually get behind this." But when you first see it, you're like, I guarantee you the words will be like, what the hell?
The executive decision to have that as a Christmas movie, or even before. I mean, we're far enough. We're still early November, so.
Do we want to do a Christmas movie that is not Die Hard for December?
Yes, this one.
No,
that's not a bad one.
Didn't Rankin Bass do Rudolph?
I'm did that too. Krampus. Krampus is a Christmas movie.
Tokyo Godfathers.
Scrooge.
Oh, that's a good one.
we'll put some up to vote. But yeah, if we want to do Flight of the Dragon in between, then can sneak that in. Not gonna take that. You always think it's not gonna take too long to watch one movie, but then if there's a book attached to it and like a comic, and
no, it doesn't take a long time to watch a movie. Yeah, I want you to go down the Satoshi Kon rabbit hole.
You already sent me down this rabbit hole. And I'm thankful you did send me down this rabbit hole because I didn't know there was an IDW comic, and then but the IDW comic of The Last Unicorn was pencils by René Delis.
Does you really want to punish him with this? Really?
Look, Satoshi Kon is one of my favorite directors, and I think Thorsten would go nuts with him.
And he's amazing, but there is so much research that goes into watching something like that. You can't just watch Perfect Blue and enjoy it for what it is, because there's a lot of psychology that goes into just that less than 2 hours movie.
I have another project. I have another project I want to tackle, probably not as part of a movie club, because there's no movie. I mean, maybe there's a movie about it, but not going to be part of my research and discovery. Is No Longer Human. There are 2 mangas out there, and then I want to read the original novel.
Did you know? What's his name? The Junji Ito one I've heard is not that good.
Yeah, I heard so too, but I mean, I got it. So I know which box. I have inventory, so I know which box it is. It's 200 yards, maybe 300-400 yards behind me in a different place. That I just have to set up and get through and find the box and all of that stuff. Newton here or there.
What the hell's a yard?
Yeah, I wanted to say meters, but then I realized who I'm talking to, so I couldn't cover that easily. No, but the IDW comic of Last Unicorn is out of print. René Delis, who did the pencils, she just posted something yesterday on Instagram saying, calling for a reprint. It's this IDW, this needs a reprint badly. And then I took the opportunity to ask, was a first crazy coincidence. I read the comic that day, and then saw who did the pencils, found her on Instagram, and then she posted an old, again, this is 12 years old, right? An old picture of Robin Hood gang on her Instagram from that comic. It's I'm just using that opportunity to ask her who her favorite characters to draw were. And then she replied saying Schmendrick and Cully. So I got some information here. some first-hand information, not everything through the manager of Beagle, but yeah. So she's still very much attached to that project. It's a pretty cool comic. I do feel though it's similar to the movie that they rushed through the second part of it. So it's a 6-issue series, more closely aligned to the book. The parts that were omitted from the movie are part of the comic. They still rushed through the last half. So issues 4, 5, and 6 are way more rushed, skip over things. And if you haven't watched the movie or haven't read the book, you'll be lost. There's stuff that's omitted that's crucial to the story. But if you know the story, if you watch the movie or read the book, it's a fun companion piece that maybe puts images out there that are less childish. So I really love the art style and yeah, to see some of that stuff being interpreted a different way than through Rankin and Bass.
We need to call it because Torsten's trying to get us all to buy a $250 out of print book.
Yeah,
it's got to be a reprint. Maybe we all just mail IDW, and maybe Omar can help there too. We got to get that to be reprinted.
Did IDW make it in a year or two?
That was cold, James. You're right, but that was cold. I'm wondering if they even still have the rights for it, because that was published back in 2010, and all the legal battles were fought right around that time, except for the elder abuse issues, which I think ended around 2017, 2018. And it wasn't until either 2020 or 2021 that Beagle got full command of the intellectual property back. So
yeah, but even so, now that he has it all back, and him, like, he didn't want it back so he can keep it under wraps, right? It's just didn't want any more, like, of this abuse of the property and abuse of himself. And with that, I'm sure if IDW knocked at his door, like sent him an email saying, "Hey, can we reprint this?" He got like 5% for a movie or something. If you get 5% for a comic, you're good. I'm sure he says yes. So.
That would be awesome because I really enjoyed reading it. That was actually one of the first IDW publications that I collected in full.
Yeah, and the art is amazing. Especially, I mean, again, they rushed through things, but the way they rushed through it was also nicely done in like spread pages. Like the scenes in the castles, all like last fifth or sixth. I think the fifth issue is like the first half is only spread pages. Like, wow.
If they had done just 2 more issues, Torsen, just 2 more, I think there would have been better pacing.
Yeah, I agree. Especially towards the second half. Like, they fleshed it all out in the beginning and then they realized they're running out of space.
That happens so often where it's like a little bit more time, like 30% or 20%.
You got to plot it first. Like, plot it first and then realize it, put it on paper. That being said, I think Beagle also didn't plot anything. He didn't even know he was going to end up with unicorns trapped in the ocean when he wrote the butterflies line saying like the Red Bull caught them all. He didn't know where this was going. So I guess this is just how Beagle wrote his book, is how they made the comic, how they made the movie.
Because there's 2 types. There's either like what's known as a gardener, or there's or an architect. 2 versions of a writer. So like a gardener will plant seeds and kind of see where it goes, like down the line. They don't know where it's going. An architect plans everything out. Now, truthfully, like to be successful, you need a little bit of both, because it's like you can't be 100% gardener where you're like, I have no idea. You know, you at least need like an idea, or like, okay, I don't know the ending, but I do know we're going here at 30%. So let me focus on that, and hopefully I come up with an ending. Whereas with an archetype, it's like sometimes it's good to stray from the path and enjoy yourself a little bit. It's like Jess Smith's The Great Cow Race. That wasn't even supposed to be in the comic, but it was so big. He's like, hey, let's actually show the cow race.
I wish that would win one of the book club polls at some point, because I would read the heck out of that again.
I need to. That's been on my reread list for a while.
And that, if licensing weren't what it is, if one of these studios could actually commit to it and treat Smith with respect, we'd have an adaptation of Bone at this point.
Yep, but that might be done, because I think Jeff Smith's tired of playing that game.
I can't blame him. But as far as this goes, I still rate this like a 9.5 out of 10, and only subtracting because the book does have more detail and doesn't have as many holes.
Have you ever read a book that's worse than the movie?
Yes, Blade.
That's fair.
I've not read the book, so I can't agree.
I think the thing, like I said, the difference is a book's got almost unlimited, especially because it's using your imagination. It's got unlimited time and resources. For a movie, it's like you only have so many resources.
Yeah, but so that's the thing with this one, right? Like the book isn't even that big. Like there's only like 200 something pages. It's not a Lord of the Rings thick or other fantasy stories. Like it's not that you couldn't be putting it in. Again, they're missing half an hour maybe, and don't make it children's movie. Like again, it's good they made it a children's movie. Otherwise, I would have never watched it in the 80s. It would have been one of those things like, oh, you got to go back and watch this, and it would have resonated differently. I'm sure. So I'm glad they did that, but come on, follow it up now with a remake. We need a remake. Even though I would agree with you, Steve. It's like at least a 9 out of 10. I would probably even say 10 out of 10, completely disregarding the shortcomings, just like we just discussed. But no, there's some stuff in there that is brushed over too quickly. So you gotta give it some minus. But for nostalgia makes up for it. But yeah, at least 9.
I would say like an 8.5 to a 9 because it's like I do think they could have polished some of it. They could have made a better product. But that said, I'm very glad I want to own it. I'm very glad it exists in the world. And it's one of those. I was happy this won because it's like honestly, I'd rather talk about The Last Unicorn than Blade Runner. Because even though both have unicorns in them.
I was about to say you were the most hyped for this and you give it the lowest rating. We don't know. James got to put it.
I'll probably give it 8.
Just do it. Okay, you're doing Josh a favor now.
Okay, I go 7.
No, higher. So Josh has the lowest rating as the one who's most hyped about it. So I'm still debating. Like I'm still before rewatching it. I was like, there's no way I'm going to show this movie to my kids, knowing my own nightmares. Now that I rewatched it, I'm like, well, it's actually not that bad from my perspective. I'm still debating. I don't know what age is appropriate. I went on to like I forget the name, the website, like age rating or blah blah whatever. Where kids and parents rate what age this movie should or any movie should be consumed at, and not the official rating. Most of them say between 9 and 10, even though it's a G-rated movie. But again, I would probably wait a few more years for my kids.
See, I do feel like I think the problem is it's not that this is a kids movie. I do feel like a lot of kids stuff gets watered down, and it's like, what about this is inappropriate? I think I saw this when I was 6 or 7.
I don't think anything is inappropriate. I think it's just the bowl is stuff out of nightmares for a kid. I don't know. See if you want to.
I think you're a responsible parent. I think you'll figure out what works best for you. I can tell you that my younger brother, he's 5 years younger than I am. The other Rankin Bass stuff, he was freaked out during a couple moments. There's a scene in Santa Claus is Coming to Town where Claus is scared and his eyes bulge and become wide, and then they go back into his skull, and that freaked him out. And Santa Claus is Coming to Town is almost universally said to be kid friendly. So if something that tame from Rankin Bass can be seen as scary, then yeah, this one would definitely be ratcheting that up a couple notches compared to some of the stuff that kids are allowed to watch in this day and age that is definitely not child friendly, though. And I'm not a prude. I think this is pretty tame.
Yeah, and you never know what's triggering. Like, could be like he came to me like half a year ago and he got like nightmares from stories about mummies in school, and they had like ancient Egypt in school and like the mummification and stuff.
I haven't watched the Mummy movie.
Not the movie, like just mummies in general, like the real life stuff. Which I don't know why they would cover that in detail in school.
Yeah, that's a little odd.
Yeah, in second grade, first or second grade when they covered it, and then he still had problems sleeping.
Just let him watch Berserk when he's like 10, like Omar did.
No.
Yeah. No.
Are you trying to cause trauma to Torson's children, John?
It won't be that bad. They'll survive it. They won't get inbred out.
they already figured out how to hack the Apple account, and they watched independently, and it seemingly was fine. The whole Jurassic Park, Jurassic World stuff, and they're like, no, it's fine, and we know it's just dinosaurs. Yeah, they're eating people, but no, they had it coming. So it's like, okay, fine. But it's just dinosaurs. What's up?
Everyone's a little different. I do think, like I said, it kind of kills me though. A lot of kids, I do feel like a lot of stuff made for kids now, it's almost like toddlers, and then it's like you're a teenager. Like there's nothing for like kids, like from
in
like
between.
6 to 13. It's like there's nothing for them.
Yeah, I mean, there's stuff, but it's dumb. Like the stuff that you find on Disney Plus or Netflix or like any streaming platform. That's what that age category is. Not that deep. At least prior, like, right, little kids, they learn something. They either learn dialogue, they learn how to read, or other stuff, or other how the world works. Maybe that's it. Maybe TV shows like the Who Is show or Who Was or whatever it's called. They explain pretty cool stuff to kids in that age range. But yeah, mythological and fiction and science fiction and fairy tales, I think, make it a little bit more deep as this movie is, but then put it a PG-13 remake.
Honestly, I hate to say it, like the best we could hope for now is Netflix, because I don't see HBO. I'm still kind of curious with Time Warner or with Discovery.
I can see a big studio picking this up. Like this is like not quite the old Lord of the Rings. Lord of the Rings has way more fun, but come on, Lord of the Rings before they made the movies, Peter Jackson movies, yes, it was known, but it wasn't mainstream. Like it was still like.
This is open a whole can of worms. I do feel like, especially in Hollywood, because I would love another space opera besides Star Wars. And same thing with fantasy, because now everything's like either Lord of the Rings or Game of Thrones. And it's like, there's other stuff.
What happened to Dune? Did that get caught in the writer's strike?
It did. It was supposed to come out last week, I believe. Now it's late March, early April 2024. And I'm okay with that because while that's been going on, it's given the team time to figure out where that third movie is going to go. And as long as they cut it off before it gets into the worm, god, pope stuff, I think as a mainstream entity, it'll be fine.
I'm curious how they're going to show the Navigators, because they did not mention them at all in the first film.
No, they did not. And I think they're going to deal with that in the second spin-off series, because they've got one focusing on the sisterhood, or I forget what they call it, but there's one of those, and then there's a second spin-off that they haven't said anything about yet. So I'm hoping they deal with that.
That's the other weird thing.
Such an interesting property, because you can have a completely run-of-the-mill sci-fi epic, and then granted, it came out before The Matrix, but then it goes full Matrix sequels, and it delves into religious allegories that make absolutely no sense. And then the son picked up the work, of course, and that didn't help things. That's why before Mr. Beagle dies, and I don't think he's anywhere close, I think he should grant the license to a studio that's going to show this work respect, and they can make it, and once he passes on, just leave it be, because that's how some of the masterpieces out there, like the Back to the Future trilogy and Princess Bride, are going to be. They're not going to be able to touch it because the creators or license holders hold them in high regard, and they're not going to allow anything further to happen.
Yeah, the worst thing that can happen is it's going to be forgotten, and the license going to go somewhere where it's locked away after when he died. The best thing is, and this is good with the one good thing of capitalism is like it goes to the biggest bidder, and which means it's gonna be a big studio that puts a lot of money on it. And because they put a lot of money on it, they have to do a remake with lots of money and a big budget. That's the best case. The worst case is it just goes away and like they might re-release it on another Blu-ray, hopefully on 4K. But I don't see anything being done with it unless someone really cares. The good thing is there are a lot of people that care about it. There were a lot of people when the movie was made that cared about it that much. Again, Christopher Lee coming to the set with his own copy of the book and saying, there are certain parts in here you can't cut out, and like insisting on this. Even when the comic was made, Peter Giltz said, you can't, I'm not going to be part of this if there are certain things I can't do. People feel strongly about it, and I hope there's one with deep pockets that does so too.
It's held in such high regard, and it's one of those things that when he shows up to conventions, Jeff Bridges will still sign copies of the book and the movie. When this was going to production, the gentleman, I forget what his name is, the gentleman that portrays the skeleton toward the end of the movie, he was friends with Jeff Bridges and let him know, hey, this is what I'm working on. And Bridges, it turns out, was a huge fan of the book and called up his agent, said, hey, I want to be involved in this project. I will do this for free. Just let me be involved in some way, shape, or form. They hadn't cast Lear at that point. So just by happenstance, he wound up with that role. So there are people within the world of celebrity and in our circles that love this movie. And I would didn't see it fade into obscurity.
Yeah, all the cast was first request. No one declined any roles. Like they didn't have to revert back to the second option on any of the roles. Like they're all like, yep. Whoever they asked, they're like, yep. Or in like case of Jeff Bridges, even volunteered. Came in like, just give me anything. I want to be part of this.
It's so funny too, Torsten, because a lot of people from our age group, one of their first experiences with Angela Lansbury was either through Murder, She Wrote or through Beauty and the Beast. No, this film was my first encounter with her. And then I watched Beauty.
Unknowingly.
Yeah.
You see, to me, again, I watched it in the German version. So it was Christopher Lee. Apparently, again, I back no idea who anyone was back in the day. But yeah, no, that cast, like this is the all-star cast. Like again, the budget was less than 3 million. I don't know if they all did it for free, but somewhere close because of Japan still wanted some money for animating this piece. Like where did that budget go?
Well, I was about to say too, with Japan, you don't know the exchange rate with the yen because it's like it could have been 3-1 at the time, because I think in the 70s.
Well, then America nowadays you probably get America for that price. They're still active though after 30, 50 albums later. just the amount of people who cared is crazy. Good to see.
I was saying my internet's going wacky. Yeah, if you ever see me doing this, it's me testing how bad my internet is.
I gotcha. I've been wondering what you've been doing for the last 20 minutes.
From my angle, like literally it'd be like, I'm like, wow.
Okay.
Now, picture this. When this was originally being shot for an adaptation, the studio that created the original Peanuts animated specials, they were in the lead to take this on. Beagle was convinced that that studio was not good enough. Imagine if that had gone that direction, because I can't picture this film being animated by that studio. Would it have been good? Potentially, but I also don't want to, in my mind, picture the last unicorn doing that happy dance that Snoopy does in the background.
I think the biggest problem, because it's like, because I've been watching Thundar, and it's like that show got canceled for a Laverne and Shirley animated series, and it's like no one talks about it. Yeah, and it's like, yeah, I'm pretty sure nothing against the Peanuts crew, but it's like, yeah, I don't think anyone would be talking about that film all these years later.
Man, I could talk about Ruby Spears for hours too.
Ruby Spears?
Yeah, the production company for Thundar.
Did not know that. Man, can we just talk about Thundar for the next 3 hours? Because that's some fun shit.
Only if it wins one of the movie clubs.
We already determined the movie for the next one. Oh, maybe not. Maybe we should do a poll.
We should do it.
Yeah,
because now I'm like, there's films I want to watch, and there's films I just want to make Torsten do all the research for.
Okay. No.
See,
my time is going to be limited.
That's why we weren't doing Blade Runner, because then you have to read Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep and watch all 5 cuts of Blade Runner and the sequel and the comic adaptations. No, we are not doing that.
Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep is painful. Good idea. Painful book.
Some of the comic adaptations are not great either.
Nope. Speaking of comics, we should probably go bug Omar a little bit.
Sounds good. I know there's so many more things to talk about this. We haven't even talked about the poetic dialogue, but I guess that's for another time. I want to stop the recording now, and then we can keep talking or go do something else. But thank you all for joining today.
Bye.
Thank you.
Noodles.